Professor Bouchard's case. Quite nice the Hayashi twist too. Yeah, I like caves, I like meteors, I like weird cases with weird places.
Random jars filled with cash.
Yeah, I like those. Those are my kind of cases.
Whoever got the ball will got a deal on it. $400,000 for a ball like that. 20 years from now, it'll be worth probably $1 million.
Yeah, people forget.
After people forget.
Yeah. No, they're still trying. Last I heard, they're still trying to get it in the Hall of Fame, though. Hall of Fame still wants it, but who knows? It's right next to some Van Gogh or something, so it's like a living room, no doubt.
Yeah.
I love America. Does everybody have a handout? I've got extras just in case. I always bring a paper clip copy just in case it needs copies. Never go without handouts.
You guys will be able to talk to him. Do your thing. I made him available now.
You want water?
I'm fine, thank you. Do we know if Trish is coming in?
We don't.
Okay. Okay, so I will have you know, I have particularly strong feelings about Pop-Up versus Hayashi. Every year, it just infuriates me. Every year. They got it wrong. That's how I feel. You cannot change my mind.
And I look forward to this day every year. I've also got meteorites today.
Right?
This is a great day.
I'm just saying, if anybody actually was an athlete, then you're going to have an issue with Papa versus Hayashi. Yeah, that's how I feel. All right. So, oh, good. I was just conveying to everybody that I have particularly strong feelings about Papa versus Hayashi.
Oh.
Every year. Every year. Tonight was a good night to understand some new language from our cases. So you're hearing things like replevin, which you may have heard before in your first year, but it's always kind of one of those fun words used in cocktail party, right?
I tell you that if you ever find yourself among non-lawyers and you really have no particular legal charge to bring against them, but you want to scare them, just tell them that you're gonna use a stopple, they're gonna be stopped. And they get really scared. They have no idea what it is. I've tried that several times with people that scurry away. What's that? What's that? And you get that look, it's like, just kidding. There's no such, he's not doing TV.
Then I just have a feeling like this is from the Hispanic side of my family. Someone's gonna hear "S stop" and they're gonna be like, "I wasn't doing anything," right? Because you understand. This is my mother when she's a kid. She thought that you could be scared because you could be afraid. So you think it's a joke? It's totally serious, right? Okay, so anybody who's a Hispanic or is around Hispanic people, all that, you'll understand the validity of that statement.
At the next party.
Oh, yes. Yes. Absolutely. So. All right. Start in the long game. We jump on food right. He loves cake here. So, the best way to do is right into the back to that as a little extra. Who'd like to take modern versus original? Okay. And no pressure, but he loves meteorites.
I know that.
By the way, this is also a good case to learn how to paint your picture. Okay? So be mindful of that. Give me some detail, really round it out for us.
Well, I'm gonna do it a little by memory because it's in the computer.
Okay.
Buttons. But a meteorite, or called an aerolite, dropped from the heavens, weighed 66 pounds, dropped on the land of the and went 3 feet into the ground. Person who possessed the land thought, another guy wanted to, the one who possessed the land, I guess, had a friend who eventually dug it up, and he wanted to find out how much it's worth. I think it was worth $105. I think he bought it for $105 or something. I think it was worth $101.
So when you say at the time, what time are we talking about?
I'm talking about 1892.
$105. I'd like $105 for no reason right now. $105 in 1892 is like unheard of, right?
Right.
That's huge.
Yeah.
So again, this is always one of the situations. Put them into context of time.
Right. So the court eventually, the issue was, is this a case of finders keepers where you occupy the land, therefore whatever you find is yours? And the court eventually ruled that no, it's not, because this is an element of nature, crashing through the skies into, just like if there was a flood in a city, and your property boundaries changed. It's because it's nature, wind, rain, meteorites, that kind of thing. So based on that, so the ruling was the finder of lost articles, even when they're found on the property or in the building, belongs to the owner, unless of course there was another true owner, the original owner, which is God. So the universe.
So let me ask you a couple of questions. One, I just lost my train of thought here. Hold on one second.
Oh,
I was just thinking, you were just saying something and it totally jumped.
God is the owner of meteorites.
No.
God.
In any event, okay.
Well,
Oh, I know what it was.
Okay.
Okay, so how do they describe the meteorite landing? you said it was 3 feet in, right?
3 feet in.
What's another term that they use to describe that?
It was 20 feet away from the pot, I don't think that counts.
No, I'm leaning more toward the term embedded,
Oh, and then.
right?
Okay,
So I
okay.
mean, if we're really painting this picture, right?
Right,
We've got a 66-pound meteorite that is barreling toward the Earth. It crashes down with such force, right? So now we're painting the picture. Really, we're getting a little amped out of it, right? It buries itself within the Earth, embedded 3 feet down. That's pretty significant, right? Like, anybody play golf? I'm raising my hand, but I don't know, right? But we've all seen, like, okay, take a swing, you miss the ball, you take a chunk out, right? You gotta figure, that's like a tiny little piece from like slamming into the ground. 3 feet down. That's halfway to a grave. Pretty significant, right? You're like, oh, it got a little dark. Okay, so, right. I'm bright and shiny, dark and twisty undertone, okay? So it's just getting a little bit better. So this is the thing. That is pretty significant in terms of the force that must have been used. So one of the terms that we want to get familiar with that we talked about, I think last week or the first week, was the term fixture, right? So they don't really get into a fixtures argument here, but if it's something that's not easily removed from the property, I would arguably say it's become affixed to the land, right?
right.
So if it's affixed to the land, who does it belong to?
The land.
The owner, right? They are simply there possessing the land, using the land, not owning the land. So he's got his guest upon the land, but he doesn't even own the land, and he's letting his guest dig up stuff that's embedded in the land. That's very different than, oh, we found this boulder sitting on the grass, right?
Right.
That's a little different. So as a practical matter, I want us to start making those distinctions. You know, if this is affixed or it's embedded, it becomes part of the land, that's gonna kind of skew our argument. The other term that I want you guys, well, there's a couple, they talk about riparian rights because they make analogous arguments to riparians. So riparians are property owners that border bodies of water. It doesn't have to be an ocean, it doesn't have to be a lake, it doesn't really matter, it just has to be a body of water, it could be a creek, okay? So I want you to become familiar with those terms. The other term that they talk about is a little awkward to say, but it makes you sound really fancy when you do, and it's escheat. Okay? Things escheat to the state. So what that means is, and you'll get this when you're in your 4th year and you go across the way to your wills and trusts class or your estates class. Escheat is when there is nobody, you go through the lines of consanguinity. So you either died with a will or without. Let's say you died with a will, but everybody's dead now. Well, where does it go? We don't know, right? If there's nobody left and you died with or without a will, ultimately it would go to the state. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't want all my stuff going back to the state necessarily. I'd like to direct where it goes. So escheat is kind of the last option when, if everybody in your family, any distant relative, or your people that you have left material to in your will are gone, ultimately it reverts back to the state. So, that being said, those are some of the terms that I want you to become more familiar with.
And they also talk about the fact that it was a movable object, meaning they did dig it up, doesn't make it a fixture. That's what you're saying.
Right.
It's not part, it is part of the land.
Right, and that's why I wanted to be specific about the language that they use there. Now, the other thing I want to be very clear about, because sometimes it gets a bit confusing, what Professor Drucker is doing here. You have to be able to identify the parties, because who ends up with the meteorite? Who ends up with it?
The landowner.
No, I guess my question is, when they start the action in court, who's got the meteorite at that point?
Ellison.
Yeah, I bought it.
Poland.
No.
Running out of stick figures.
And I bring this up because the person that you identify is going to be a very particular designation that is also one of the favorites for Professor Drucker. And you will become very familiar. And it's also another term that we debate about how to pronounce. So, yes, Winchell. So explain to me how Winchell gets it.
I believe that Hoagland was on the property, he was the occupier, then, his friend was Alex who came and dug it up, or vice versa. And then they sold it to Winchell, or Alex sold it to Winchell.
So I think you'll find that Elixon was the tenant.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. And that would make Hoagland the tenant's guest.
Okay.
So who's Winchell? Because there was only two guys digging stuff up, right? Who's Winchell?
Who's the one that bought it? I mean,
Right.
Right.
Okay, so he bought it for money?
Yeah.
Which we call what in contracts? Consideration. Okay, did he know that it wasn't theirs?
I don't know.
No.
No.
So we have no notice that it belongs to somebody else, and for valuable consideration, that is what Professor Drucker lovingly calls,
A bona fide purchaser.
okay? So there are some special rules for that and what you do with a bona fide purchaser. So I'll let Professor Drucker take it from there, but this is one of his fave terms as well.
This is a great one.
But this is a prime example of you have to be able to identify all the parties, right?
Gotta know the players, gotta have a scorecard before you go see the game.
And replevin in this case becomes
Scorecard.
so important because this will explain to you why you use replevin over trover.
Yeah, and remember that in real property, there's no such thing as, you don't sue anybody for real property. I mean, there's certain things that happen under real estate law, but most of the time you're doing something that's either pursuant to a contract or it's pursuant to a tort. So you gotta remember all of your contracts and your torts, which like I said before, your first year, I hope, I trust everyone paid attention because as you go forward in law school, your first year can either help you or it can haunt you. Take your choice. It never goes away. So, and again, in this class, it's even better because then we throw all these old, all these old common law torts at you that we don't really use anymore, but I love. So, of course, you get to learn about those as well. So, but this is really a neat case because it tells you that when we come to the law of, it's called the law of finding. Is it true, yes or no, that in fact the law in the United States is finders keepers? Losers keepers.
Usually.
No. See, aren't you glad you're in this case now? It's really anything but. Okay, all as we'll see as we go forward, it's all different categories of how you found it, right? We talk about you have to go ahead and look at what the property is. Is it abandoned? Is it lost? Is it enslaved? You go through a number of different categories, and we'll see tonight before you finally can figure out who actually owns the land or the object in this case. And the other thing is that you also have persons who own land have certain rights too. Okay, so in this particular case, we're back in Iowa in the late 1800s, right, almost the turn of the century. And what we have is a situation where we have two fellows who are sitting up, I imagine, on a porch, right, somewhere in Iowa at night, and they're looking up into the sky, and all of a sudden they see this boom, and they hear this thud, and they're like, "What is it?" And they're going to go out, and they're hoping it's Martians, but it's not. And anyways, with that said, they get up and they walk out into the field, and a fellow named Elixon, right, who's the renter, and then his friend, someone he's just invited to be on the, watch the sky with him or whatever they're doing. And they go over and they see this, what they call in those days an aerolite, which is still a great word you hear every so often. Today we call it a meteorite, right? It's the same thing. And Hoagland looks down, and however heavy this was, I'm not sure exactly how heavy it was, but it was apparently pretty good size. And he picks it up and he says, "Ooh, this is neat." And he takes it. He walks off and he goes down to actually a museum. And the guy who runs the museum is Winchell, and he says, "I'll give you $105." Because in those days, meteorites were pretty rare. Now they weren't really rare, they just didn't know what they looked like. So there was lots of meteorites actually flying around and nobody even knew it. It's kind of weird. But anyways, with that said, but they're still pretty rare even with all the other ones.
Well, because they usually break up significantly more than that
Yeah.
prior to impact. So I learned that much in science class, that generally speaking, you wouldn't get something that is that significant. I mean, 66 pounds,
big.
right?
Yeah,
That's-
66 pounds.
That's a small child.
That's
A
bigger
medium-sized
than
child.
Definitely bigger than a cannonball, I can tell you that, so it must have been
Let me
pretty nice.
let me give you a point of reference. I have 4-year-old twins. The heavy one weighs 43 pounds. So this is like 1.5 of him barreling toward the land and slamming in 3 feet. It's pretty significant, right?
That's pretty big.
It's like almost Angelina Jolie right now. They said she was 76 pounds. It's like really sad, but it's.
Let's see, what Angelina Jolie.
Sorry, present day reference. Thank you.
Okay, so Oakland sells to Winchell for 105, right? Notice who's suing him? Goddard is suing Winchell. Why? He didn't find it. He wasn't even there. Matter of fact, remember, he's the owner. Elixir is his renter. He's not even there when all these events take place. But he sues Winchell. How? Now that we're all see, now you know it cannot be finders keepers, losers weepers. That's why I like this case. It shows you that's flaws, anything but that. Because here's a guy who's not even there, and he ends up winning. So how did he manage that one, Trish?
Because it didn't meet the requirements of the occupancy rule.
What?
The occupancy rule, he challenged the occupancy rule, which was, hold on, which one was that? Because he felt,
Well, tell me in plain language, then, why did he win?
because he was the landowner.
Very good. Because he's the landowner, and landowners have rights. Now, what is the actual particular theory of law that they had to use to sort of get him to have a meteorite that lands on his planet? Because you'll hear this over in this class several times as well, so it's worth noting. What's that word called? When all of a sudden you add or you subtract from your real property by, an act of God or an act of nature, whatever you want to
Oh.
say. Again, don't send me hate mail. There's a theory, you'll hear it later. We use it a lot of. The other thing I love is beach law. In fact, I've almost gone to jail for beach law.
Accretion.
Accretion.
Accretion, very good.
Professor Drucker got a little badass and
Oh, yeah,
told somebody to arrest him
that's right.
because he was like, "I will own your Malibu home if you arrest me."
Trying to get him to arrest me so I can sue him.
He's much more hardcore than you think.
Yeah, there was a day people feared. Believe me now, but don't believe me now, youngins, but there was a day. All right, so Goddard goes ahead and sues Wilshire, saying that the meteor has accreted to his land. And the court goes, okay, that makes sense. It's kind of an act of God. Again, we see it more with beach cases. When, the tide goes in, the tide goes out, things are exposed, things are taken away. That's all called accretion. So if you ever buy beach property and all of a sudden the tide moves dramatically, all that land that gets uncovered is yours. Consequently, if it happens to take away because of the storm or something like that, never comes back, you lose the land. You have no recourse to build anywhere else. It's kind of interesting. So, based on the theory of accretion, Goddard goes ahead and sues Winchell's. But again, it's an interesting case because here we have Goddard who owns the property. When the meteorite lands, he's not even there. Elixir is there, he's renting, so maybe he has some right to it too. We don't think so, a renter. Not really, as we'll see later. And then Hoagland's just his friend, just a guy who, thought he'd pick the meteorite and figure out whether it's so anyways, that's how this works. So finders, keepers, losers, weepers, forget that. By the end of today, you're never going to understand where that came from. The law here is anything like that. He sues for replevin, right? What does that mean? If this is one of your common law courts, you probably didn't do a whole lot about it in your class. Although I've seen it on the end of complaints from time I think it's just, like I said before, I think it's just to scare people. I think they just put it in the bottom. The attorney goes, I don't remember what you told me. So you have to make them look it up. But you can still replevy stuff. In fact, you can replevy stuff under the UCC. There's actually a section for it there too. So it's not like we don't use it for it. What does replevy mean?
To get back to your personal property.
Okay, you actually want the meteorite. back.
You want the thing,
personal-
that particular thing.
That thing. What is Trover then? Trover is the flip side. What's Trover? That common.
Value.
Right, in other words, for whatever reason, the meteorite's gone, but you want you want the $105, you want the value of it, that was Trover. Okay, so that's the difference between the two, otherwise they're pretty similar. Okay,
I have a question. So is replevin like specific performance in contracts where it's like
very close.
You want that to occur, what you agree, yeah. It's similar in a sense that in specific performance, you're saying, I want to follow through with this action, you know, or I want you to sell me that house or that car, whatever it is. It's kind of the same concept in that you want the actual thing, you want the piece of property. You don't want something, you don't want the value of it because it could go up in value, you never know, right? Trover is gonna be the opposite, you just want the value of the property versus the actual.
specific performance, they're more about the action.
Right.
Like I want you to sell me that house.
Right.
Or that piece of property. Okay.
Similar.
Yeah, I mean, replevin is like an injunction, you just do that. It's an injunction really. Now, a lot of people don't know this one, so you know, in case it ever comes up and you see a bunch of these down on the end, you can actually plead both, even if the meteorite's still existing. You can still say, man, let me keep it, I'll take the value. You can actually complete that. You can plead both and see what they not exclusive of each other. All right, we off to a flying start, so to speak. All right, good job. Good job. We're off to a good start. I also want to mention that one year, not lately, really they haven't done it lately, but one year on the bar, they asked, can he replevy the property? And everyone thought, sure. So don't forget, it even shows up on the bar from time to time. They have the right to ask you about common counts, they do. So be careful, it's a big replevy question. You know, people were calling me in tears, I remember replevy. You have to at least know them. At least those two, but you'll see replevin, you won't ever see too many other ones. Replevin, though, you might see because you still have to use and see. And I've seen replevin on the end of complaints. That's still exist, right? Okay, we good? All right, moving on. Moving on. Fell from the heavens. Who would like to brief East versus Brazelton? In kind of a neat old case. Again, it's an old case, so try to give us a little context to it. Let us know what's going on.
So Brazelton was the original plaintiff. He filed for suit because he wanted to stop the defendant from interfering with the extraction of the cargo and to recover the property that he had already obtained. So in November 1827, there was a boat that sank and it was full of bundles of water lead and pigs to about the number of 3,000 and wholly abandoned. It was wholly abandoned by the owner. So Brazelton knew or had information about where the boat sank. So he marked trees that he would be able to know where the shipwreck was. And he also put a buoy in December of 1854, so that he'd be able to locate the shipwreck was. And then he was in January of 1855, that's when he arrived, and he intended to extract it the next day, but he ran into complications, difficulties, he had to fix his boat, and so he didn't get around to it, and so another person, Bennett Eads, came in September of 1855, so it's been January to 9 months, where the defendant comes and he parked his boat over the spot and he began to extract the cargo. And the lower court entered in favor of Brazelton and awarded him damages. So, what I have as the issue is, did Brazelton do enough to possess the abandoned cargo? And then we go into like analysis of what was sufficient for possession. They said it wasn't, he didn't have to actually possess the lead in his hands, but he had to do more than just dropping the buoy and staying in town from January to September and marking the trees, which he argued was sufficient for possession. But the court said that in doing that, he was only indicating his desire or intention to appropriate the property. And what I have as the rule is, the occupation or possession of property lost, abandoned, or without an owner must depend upon an actual taking of the property with the intent to reduce it to possession. So in order to establish that he had possession, he had to park his boat over the area.
Okay. Pretty good. Let me ask you a quick question. A lot of students go over this, which might actually change your opinion about this case. This case, again, is about the, hold on. It looks like the Titanic. It's actually the good ship America. Yeah. And so the ship is sitting on the ocean, on the river, right? It sank, and the owner abandoned it. Okay. Is that right? The owner knows where it is, he just doesn't care. He's gone. He says, I don't really care about lead bars. And lead in pig is even worse. That's like the lowest grade of lead you can find. It's just like junk lead, and they're gonna melt it, chunky pieces, and they're gonna melt it down into lead. It'll never be as good as really good lead. Just pig iron too. I don't know if you remember that. Pig lead, pig iron is what we call it. So, anyway, with that said, so he abandons the good ship America. And basically, it sinks when? Oh, yeah, it's done.
In
When did it sink?
1827, so
Okay, so 11,
20 years.
27, but remember that's 18. And then along comes Brazelton, right? And Brazelton is one of those guys. This is what he does for a living. He basically goes back and forth over the rivers, and he goes ahead and he gets all the stuff that's down below, right? Okay, so that's what he does. So he goes and he learns the story, however he finds out about it. Probably just an old goes out and lo and behold, he finds it. I found it. And so when did he find it? When did he find it?
Says that he arrived in January 1855.
Okay, so he finds it in January of 55, right? It must be quite a story. Yeah. But he does find it in 1855. Okay, so how many years later is that? So this is taking place over, I want to point out that this case it's not like this took place over 3 days. It took place over many, many years, right? Now, if it did take place over 3 days, your opinion would probably be different on this piece. So I was kind of pulling this out just to show it's not quite as crazy as it sounds. So he finds it. Along comes Brazelton. and the actual true owner is known, but he vanishes. So once you abandon, what does that mean? Then it's fine, pretty much almost as long as there's keepers. It's really, really close. That's back. And so what he does is he goes ahead and he marks a couple of trees, right? Because look, it's there. He marks another tree. It's there, so he's leaving his marks, right? And then to top everything else out, he puts like a little boy on top, right? So now he knows, right? That knows what it is. But it just so happens that Brazelton's a busy guy. So he says, yeah, pig iron, I'll come back later for it. It's valuable enough to say, for sure, but it's not gold or anything like that, all right? It's not important. It's just something that would be nice if we got it. So he leaves, right? He says, I'll come back. Meanwhile, for whatever reason, along comes Eads, right? Eads comes along, and probably his business is what? Following guys like Brazelton. There was actually guys that did that. You know, I mean, he could be like Brazelton, or he could just follow these guys around. You know, that's what they did back in those days to some degree. Anyways, and so he goes ahead, and he does what? He says, oh, look at that. I know where it is now, and what does he do? Pulls the boat off. He takes all the land, right? He goes and he empties it. Meanwhile, somewhere, and what date was that he actually went
In
into that?
September of 55.
Okay, so he comes about a month later, right? Not a month, is that right?
No, September,
Oh, I'm sorry, September. So how long is that now?
89 months.
Okay, so he comes about 9, right? That's what I thought. He comes about 9 months later and finds it. And so how long has Brazelton left it there? You know, first of all, it's already been in the water for almost 30 years. Then he leaves it there for 9 months until Eads actually. So you see, it takes place over a very longer period of time. Again, had it taken place over 1 week, I think they might have been a little different. Maybe, but again, this is how that worked. And so Eads pulls it all out of the ground. And what happens? Hey, that's my pig iron, right? That's Brazelton comes after him in court. Hey man, I used to live in Texas. Someone actually asked me that the other day. Someone walked up to me and said, why do you have a slight draw? I said, I used to live in Texas. That's where I'm from. All right. So when I say y'all, I mean it. I know what y'all means. All right. Anyway, so with that said, he goes in. Okay, so they go to court. What happened? Sort of tell me about some of the terms that we now kind of have here. What do they? Well, who wins? Put you that way.
In the circuit court, Brazelton won.
Okay, so the lower court Brazelton wins, right?
But then in the Supreme Court of Arkansas,
Right.
Eads.
Eads wins. Right. Well, why? Why? What was the basis for their decision? Because it kind of sounds, I mean, things moved pretty slowly back then, by the way. As long as this took that wouldn't have been unusual. Just so you know, I mean, these are kind of how these things are. So, I mean, don't think that Brazelton's being, slack. He's not. I mean, things move very slowly back then. So.
Well, and speaking of timing in this case, I always again like to say we have to put this in context of time. I realize it was 9 months, which was probably longer than it needed to be, but we're not talking about, the people on, what's that show called? Deadliest Catch, right? They're going out, they're coming back in within a couple of days. We're talking about like a steamboat in 1861. That takes some time, right? So this is not happening quickly, and when they're having to refurbish something or repair something, that's going to take some time. So 9 months being reasonable there, maybe, maybe not. Very different than now, right?
Okay, so what was the judge's basis for his ruling? We can get that, we can move on.
For
That's
which,
about all that's
which
left.
ruling? The lower court or the?
Not the Supreme Court.
Oh.
The ultimate ruling.
Yeah, let's deal with the ruling. The Supremes. I mean, why, you're the judge, and Brazelton's mad, Eads is happy. Why? What was, and when Brazelton came to you and said, what the hell? That was my pig iron. What did he tell him?
Well, didn't he say just it wasn't sufficient to warn off anybody that would come along?
Okay, yeah.
And Eads didn't use his markers to get, we don't know if he did, but he claims that he didn't use the markers to make the trees to get the land, so kind of, I guess, finders keepers.
Well, I mean, again, it's not finders keepers,
Mhm.
although it's, you know, kind of like the second finder's the keeper on this one. There's something about it. Because remember that very importantly, we know the original owner is not unknown in this case. That's what's kind of interesting. They know who he is, and he said, I don't care. They said, we don't care. We just go away. We're not even gonna fight it. We don't care. We're not interested. It's probably a company or something like that. So these two guys are fighting over what's essentially abandoned property. So the true owner goes out of the picture. We don't care about him. Okay. We have two persons who are potential finders. One says, I found it first. Okay, the second one says, so what?
There's a specific reason that we get this case before Papa versus Hayashi,
Right.
because of this abandonment issue. You have to understand this before we get there.
So what made the difference? Why is Eads' claim better over Brazelton's, even though Brazelton was first in time? Because he's claiming that he found it and he acquired it, right? He's saying it's mine. Court says no. Why? And Eads said, yeah, that's why. Mm-hmm. Like that. Very big word. Big word, property. But don't, again, by the end of the semester, don't ever dismiss it again. This is a big word. It's because Eads took possession. He said, that's good, but under your theory, you actually have to take physical possession. It's not enough just to market, because what happens when you market? Some fool like Eads comes around and says, get this boy out of the way, and he takes it. So in other words, for Brazelton's claim to be good, he had to actually physically possess the land, which he never did. And so for Eads, because he is now the person in possession, and possession is a huge word.
You simply tying a buoy up is not
Not good enough.
sufficient, right? I mean, there are a few things that you can do to identify something that's underwater, but
Well,
we know that was not enough.
Yeah, the one they used to do is they would just leave a boat on top of it.
Right.
So nobody could get it, but he took the boat away. The boat was gone.
We said the buoy was just showing the intention of possessing.
Right, he said the buoy was enough, and the court kind of said. And again, that's when this 9-month period comes in. I think that played into it quite a bit.
I'm already starting to get worked up about this intention to possess something. Okay. I'm already gearing into where we're going.
No deal. Okay, so anyways, that's this case. We good? Okay, everyone on board so far? Okay. It gets worse.
It gets fun now.
Well, it gets fun first, then it gets more English and strange. That's the way to say it.
So the next case
All right.
that we have, the way I nickname it in my case book is the almost case, right? Totally bogus, they got it wrong, I don't agree. Now, I don't have a black robe, so nobody cares. But every year, oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. I don't know that I would go that route, but I'll consider. Okay, I don't like having a boss, so we'll see. Then everyone's my boss at that point. Okay, so Papa versus Hayashi, kind of a big case, right? So, or at least a popular one in terms of like actual events, right? Anybody watch baseball? Right? Okay, anybody familiar with this case? But anybody, I mean, you guys know who Barry Bonds is, right? Okay, so pre all of the steroids, well, maybe not pre all of the steroids, but that was the kind of thing that we've heard about him recently, right? So, in fact, pretty successful baseball player, right? Pretty big deal because he's knocking homers out of the park like it's going out of style, right? And why was this one particularly important?
It was the most home run in a single season.
So it was going to be huge, right? So this isn't that long ago in terms of property cases that we have, right? So it's 2002 case. Who wants to give us the facts?
I will.
Okay.
Alright, so, at Pac Bell Park, a bunch of fans were standing in the back of the stadium, because Barry Bonds was gonna hit the 73rd home run. And he hit it in the first inning, and Babe Ruth had the title, then, I forget who had it, then Mark McGwire, who was also on a bunch of steroids.
But nobody quite figured that at the time, but if you look at the picture of him from like a few seasons before, afterwards, and then you look at him, you go, duh!
If you look at Mark McGuire's picture when he was on the Oakland Days.
Right.
He was little, and then
Right,
he
well,
just.
Let me just tell you, I was a Pittsburgh Pirates fan, and I actually walked into the room one day and said, "Who's the fat guy?" They said, "It's Barry Bonds." I said, "What?" This really skinny guy.
Oh, yeah,
I didn't even
Barry Bonds.
recognize him.
So,
Mark McGuire was that way too. They were both skinny. They were little, and you could just tell.
yeah, no joke. If you look at him a few seasons before, you go, whoa, either that guy's eating every bit of protein that's within a mile radius of him and working out like 19 hours a day, or somebody's getting a little help, right?
Yeah.
Sammy Sosa, by the way.
Sammy Sosa. I was just gonna say that. Sammy Sosa was the same.
I'm sorry, after he changed his skin color completely, I can't think of whether or not he took steroids. He just does not look like the same person.
Yeah.
He looks like a mime. It's bizarre. It's bizarre to me.
It's pretty gross, actually.
It's whatever, you know, whatever. It's his thing. It's just a bizarre choice to me.
Okay, so at the
But-
back of the stadium.
Right? That was his thing. Okay.
So at the back of the stadium, Popov and Hayashi were two of the fans back there trying to catch the ball. And so he steps up to the plate in the first inning and belts one back there.
And why that location?
Because he was notorious for hitting home runs there.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why people were literally gathered. So, right, we're starting to paint the picture, right? They're gathered. They're mobbing over there because that's likely where the ball's going to go.
And there were no seats back there. Everybody was just standing because it's a stand section in the back of the park anyways. So the ball goes in the Popov's glove, but he doesn't retain full possession, and that's what the issue is. The first issue, I think there's two issues in this case.
Does it go in the glove?
I mean, it
Do
does.
we know if it went in the glove?
It does, and then it bounces up.
Are we sure?
You
You get a camera shot of that?
See, that's the whole problem with this case. The conflict I had is like I was thinking about football. You know, retaining possession while you're getting hit. The question is, did he have possession of it? And he didn't clearly. And you can't go upstairs for review on this one.
Did he say
You know?
clearly?
Uh-huh.
With Popov and Hayashi. Have you ever? You can see it on YouTube, by the way.
Oh, really?
It's just a menagerie. You won't. It's in the break. Let's look this up in the break.
Yeah, I'm curious, but I mean, you can't get it zoomed in and from different angles because that's what you have to see to determine whether or not he had possession of it. So he didn't have possession of it because of what the court ruled in the first issue, and then the issue ends up being whether you can bring a conversion action against somebody if they don't have full possession of the property. And the courts.
Well, so before you go there, I want you to kind of break it down for me a little bit. So
Okay.
the ball gets hit.
More facts, yeah. Okay, so it hits his glove. He gets tackled as soon as it gets maybe
By who?
By the crowd, the people.
Right.
They tackle him to the ground. They hit him. They kick him. I'd probably do the same thing. It pops out of his glove, so he's on the ground.
Come on, I'm going to teach you better than that. You never say that on video. Thank you.
Okay. So Hayashi also got knocked to the ground. He got out of the mob and finds the ball just popped out and takes it and puts it in his pocket and hides it in his pocket until he's in front of the cameraman, and then he holds it up in front of the cameraman saying, "I got it. I'm a snake. I'll see what I do." And
Is he? Where did he find the ball?
on the ground,
Okay.
And where was he?
he was on the ground.
It like rolls up to his nose.
Yeah.
See, no, he's on the ground too.
Is he on the ground because he tackled the other guy?
No, he's on the ground because he got tackled. He was in the midst of the crowd. He was right
Just
there, right.
Innocent. Got knocked down himself, right?
I can see whose side you're on here.
I don't agree with that. I think, if anybody should have had it, it should have been Pablo.
Was it his fault that it got knocked out of his glove
Was it Hayashi's fault?
or near his glove?
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
It certainly was not Hayashi's fault.
If he had been the one to knock it out of his glove, then I'd agree with you completely.
Yeah, but if Hayashi was the one where it bounced off of his hand, he'd be arguing the same thing.
You ever play ball?
Never had to play baseball.
Yeah.
I played up through college. Yeah.
Okay. What position?
Catcher.
Okay, me too, so I like you a little more. Okay. So, that being said, if you're catching and it's a third strike and you drop the ball, is that person out?
No.
Kind of a trick question.
Unless I throw him out at first base.
Or unless somebody's standing on first.
Right.
Maybe that's a softball, I don't know. Okay, so you have to actually do what with the ball?
Catch.
Like, completely, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're an outfielder. And the ball hits the heel of your glove. And it hits the ground. Is that an out?
No.
Okay, you're a shortstop. You pick up the ground. You throw it.
The person.
First baseman drops it.
It's
Is
not.
that an out?
No, it's not.
Did you
Unless-
intend for it to be an out?
Unless he gained possession of it before and the ump calls him out and then he drops it, which is what could have happened here theoretically. Because I haven't seen him do it.
Theoretically, it could, but nobody knows.
Nobody knows exactly.
So, do you get credit for hoping that you're going to get an out? Do you get credit for wanting it to be out?
No, you do not.
Do you get credit for practicing 10 times and having it be out, but then it not working out that time? No, you don't. Okay, so
you think
I love this case.
Hayashi, you think Hayashi should just get it free and clear and say it's finders keepers is what you're saying?
I'm not saying finders keepers. I'm saying it's a melee, and somebody ended up with the ball. And if he had been the one to cause the guy to lose the ball, I'd probably feel a little bit different. I'd still be like, well, we don't know if he had the ball. If they said he pulled it out of his glove, like you've seen those bad videos on TV where like
Yeah.
the nasty old lady comes over and pulls the ball out of like the 4-year-old boy's hand. Who's like, I caught a ball again, right? That lady, I'm like, you're out of here, lady. But in this case, you've got a guy who is hoping and praying to catch a ball, who's not very good at it apparently, and is more concerned with getting like hit in the head. I mean, you just take the hit at that point, don't you? How much did this ball cost or a ball worth?
$1 million, but it only sold for $400,000.
Okay, well, whatever. Like I was like $105. I'll take it, right? And like I do okay, but I'll do $100, right? So for $1 million,
Wait, you're saying on video that you would melee for $105?
no. What I said was I would take the hit for $1 million.
Okay.
I'd probably just like be like, you just gotta deal with what's coming. And if you're going down, you better hold on to the ball. Okay, you're a catcher, right? Have you ever caught the ball? Well, this is the thing that I wanted to make sure everybody understands. If you ever play catcher, and you stand on home plate without a ball, you deserve to get hit. Okay? You know this, right?
Without a ball.
Without a ball.
Yes.
You stand on home plate, you're gonna cause some friction. So if you are on home plate and you have a ball, what do you think is going to happen with the person running in?
You're going to get hit.
You're going to get hit hard. The train's coming, right?
Okay.
So maybe this guy wasn't a catcher, he wasn't a very good one, right? You get that ball, you better be prepared to get hit. Now sadly for this guy, right, he may or may not have had the ball near him and then just gets trounced by a mob of people. This guy takes a beat down. Like this is the reality, right?
Yeah.
He got jumped into some game at that point, right? Because he just got beaten up by a mob of people. The ball is out of his glove. That we know. What we don't know is if he ever retained possession. Could he even testify that he had possession of the ball?
No.
No. What would you do if you were him? I'm not suggesting anybody perjure themselves, but I'm just saying, I'm going to guess, even with the head injury, I'm going to tell the court, I felt it in my glove. It wasn't until I got knocked down and beaten that I let go.
Once I hit the ground.
Right.
Popped out.
He couldn't say that.
This is my position. My position is okay. So in football or in baseball, when you're a catcher on home plate and you don't have the ball, you're going to get trampled because that's part of the game. Same thing in football. When you regain possession, it's part of the game. You're going to get hit.
so that's why they look closely at possession.
Right.
Here, that's not part of the game, the mob, there is no game, there's no game, you got violated by a mob.
Because he's the one that stood under the ball.
I mean, they were all.
Was,
there for the
let me
same-
just say, do you think that it was probably anticipated that he was gonna catch a little friction in the middle of that mob?
Yeah, a little, but not get beaten up.
I mean, everybody was, realistically, what probably happened is everybody rushed toward the same area. You ever seen like a stampede?
Yeah.
Right, everybody's going to the same area, right? Somebody's trying to run out the door. You're gonna bottleneck at some point, or you're all gonna go down for the same thing, and then people are just slamming down. And they're moving around, and it's getting crazy, right? You know it's gonna be like that in that section. This was not like unreasonable to assume that that was gonna happen.
I don't think so either. I think until you can deem whether or not you actually have possession by looking at the video, that's the only way you can deem one side or the other real. I mean, I totally see where you're coming from, and I sympathize. I sympathize obviously.
Well, who gets the ball if he doesn't? What do you do with it?
If who doesn't? If Hayashi doesn't?
If the guy on the ground doesn't get the ball, who does?
Whoever picks it up.
Interesting.
But Papa had it, so he should get half of it, which I think.
Did he have it?
That's the question. That's, you know what I mean? That's the question of this case. I think.
Right, but so in any other sport, if there is a question about the possession, it's not an out. It's not a catch. It's not completed.
I don't like the way Hayashi did it either, like hit it, you know?
No, but we haven't even gotten there. My question is about whether or not this guy had physical possession of the ball.
We don't know that until we look at the video.
Right. We don't.
So,
There is no video of him catching it.
well,
So we can't just manifest it.
There is a video, apparently.
Not of him catching
It's
it.
inconclusive. It's-
Nobody can
you
tell.
gotta
Every
watch it.
angle,
It's-
you cannot
It's just
tell.
a bunch of people beating each
It
other.
gets close and then it's just like, whoop.
Hilarious.
It just the way it hits. There is no video of him catching the ball. He can't tell you that he caught the ball. Nobody can support that he caught the ball. So who cares who picked it up afterwards? The smart guy who was like, well, I'm gonna pick it up and I'm gonna just put it in my pocket because I don't want to end up like that guy. Because he's bleeding out of several different orifices of his body, presumably at that point. I don't want to look like that. But I mean, at that point, you just kind of wait until you get the good camera shot, and then you're like, hey. Because at that point, if somebody comes up and punches you in the face, you're like, okay, now I've got $1 million ball, and I own your house.
Pretty much.
Right?
Pretty much, yeah.
So now, okay, so now we get to the, okay, there's a conflict about who possessed the ball, right? So now, do you want to be that judge that has to apportion what percentage to give to each one? Does one guy get more because he got beaten up over it? Or does the other guy get more because he actually caught the ball? If you're going to say they both have some interest in it, how do you apportion that?
I would say, and this is my bias, you would give 75% to Popov because he took the brunt of it and questionably had possession of it. And if Hayashi were in that position where he was the one to have first contact, he would have gotten mauled too.
But-
And you can't say whether or not he would be able to retain possession of it. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't.
But the guy who ends up with the ball, he's the only one we know that actually physically possessed the ball. So doesn't he get more?
It could be a wrongful possession though.
Not by him.
It could be.
Not by him.
If Popov had possession of
He
it.
got knocked down too. There is nothing to support that he committed any criminal act or negative act against the other guy. Right?
That's concluding that Popov didn't have possession of it, and he questionably did. I'm not saying there's facts to support that he did.
Well, but my point is Hayashi did not make any negative act toward Popov. There's nothing in here that suggests that he hit him, kicked him, knocked him over.
But if Popov had possession and just dropped it and it was his property and Hayashi picked it up, does it make it Hayashi's?
Yeah,
It does.
if he didn't catch it.
Well, I'm saying if he had possession of it and it was his.
Right, but then he'd probably be able to say, like, I felt it, I closed my hand around it, there hopefully be some video or something.
Yeah, it's can't determine whether or not he had possession, in my opinion.
So as far as I'm concerned, the court pied out on this, like they just, okay, we'll give you each half. Like,
Well, what was even more disappointing is how much it sold for, you know what I mean? In my opinion, that was just like 400,000, that's not much. And because Barry Bonds not as much as there. I mean, it's a lot for a
I'll
baseball, but
take it. It's a freaking baseball. How much do you think the ticket cost there?
for America's pastime sport where they get paid the most out of any sport in America, you know, there are guys that have, you know, close to $200 million contracts. It's ridiculous. And I don't know, I thought the record-setting home run ball, even if he's on steroids, I thought it would have at least gone for $1 million.
Not my forte. But let me ask you this, before we even get to any of this discussion, why can either of these guys potentially possess the ball? Who does the ball belong to?
Before it was hit, it belonged to the Major League Baseball, and then once it was hit, it doesn't belong to anybody.
So it's what? Just out of curiosity.
What's the term that we
What's
use?
the term we use when the owner gives up?
Go back to Eads versus Brazelton.
Um,
How could it belong to either Eads or Brazelton?
The owner.
possession or abandon.
Go counsel. Abandoned.
Right, so we start here with the premise that Major League Baseball, once the ball is hit out of the park, which, I mean, presumably it's still in the park because it's in the stands, but it's out of the field, it's considered abandoned. So now it belongs to whoever what?
Whoever gets possession of it.
Whoever possesses it, right? Now, in this case, we don't know. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Who's the guy on the camera holding the ball?
A snake, in my opinion.
Well, I would agree with you if he is the one that did it to the guy. I don't even know that he knew that it bounced off the guy's glove. Right? We don't know because he got knocked down on the ground too. All he knows is the ball gets bumped around and he opens his eyes and it's like sitting in front of his face. So he grabs it, puts it in his pocket discreetly, and waits until people start getting up off the ground. So how could he be a snake? He doesn't know that anybody caught it.
And I agree with you in a lot of respects because balls that are hit out like foul balls and all the rest of it, it's whoever gets it. You know, you see all these awful stories of you know, videos of little kids that have it, but all of a sudden they drop it or something like that, hits off their hands, and then an adult grabs it and they don't give it back to the kid. But it's like, too bad you didn't have possession of it.
Well, I fully support my husband punching that person in the face if there's a camera shot of my kid actually catching the ball. If it bounces off my kid's glove, you know what I'm gonna say? It's okay, bud, we're gonna work on catching some more, so next time you'll catch the ball. It's cool, don't worry about it.
I'm not arguing with you.
No, I know you're not. I know people think you really have to talk about this stuff. I do. But I mean, here's the thing though. Tell me where the guy who ends up with the ball, tell me how he's a snake.
I just didn't like that he hit. Yeah, that is a good point, but I mean, I just didn't like the description by the events that transpired that he hit it. You know,
Don't you think that was more for self-preservation? What do you think was gonna happen if he's like, oh, I think this ball, and like, don't you think, well, he's still on the ground, somebody's gonna be like, oh, what ball? Knock into him, he's gonna lose a couple teeth
Well, what do you think
before.
about what went through his head at the time they found it? Like, oh my God, this is mine.
Yeah.
right in his pocket.
Cause he's the one that actually caught it.
It's not the one that he's the one that found it on the ground. That's
We cannot say definitively that anybody caught it before he did.
and we can't say definitively that nobody had possession of it before he did.
Correct?
So it's just
Correct. The only time when we can say somebody took possession of this was when he picked it up and put it in his pocket. Am I incorrect in saying that? I mean, they don't feel the same way I do. They agree that he has some pre-possessory interest, hope and prayer that he's gonna catch the ball, and like it got adjacent to him, so somehow that means he caught it. Like, because he changed, okay, I'll give you this one. Maybe he had it change trajectory because it hit him in some way. That's about as good as you're gonna get from me.
because I'm such a football fan
Mhm.
and I'm such I love seeing replays with possessions and whether or in while they had possession of the ball. I'm all about that. So that's the question, and without proof of that, you can't say definitively that he did or did not have possession of it. So therefore, do you give it all to Hayashi? Not in my opinion. I would. Just
I agreed with you up until the do we just give it all to Hayashi? I think you're right. You can't definitively say that he caught it. That's a problem in those sports, right?
Yeah.
It's not out until it's in your glove or you caught the ball and taken physical possession of it. So let me give you this example, okay? Outfield, right? Center fielder, right fielder running towards each other because they're both going to catch the ball. It pops out of center fielder's glove and you're going, oh, they almost had him out. But then right fielder catches it, right? You've seen those where it like deflects and then bounces it, right? So we've got a hope to get an out. It's not out because it's out of the person's glove, but then it's out when somebody actually has physical possession of it before it hits the ground in this case. But
Right, that's all,
Right.
that's all I'm thinking about, is
Okay.
before it hits the ground, is it
Right.
actually out? In this case, it hit the ground, I mean, it has nothing to do with it, because it's a game, right, it's the rules of the game.
Right.
So, I don't know, I don't think, agree to disagree.
okay. I mean, I agree to disagree with the court. They don't agree with what I think. They're wrong, but they agree with what I think. You see why I like this case though.
The second I saw it said it hit the web, I'm like, oh, he's gonna drop it, and I'm gonna pick it up, and then I kept reading.
Well, interestingly, that's where it's supposed to hit. So heel of your glove, right? Like heel of your palm. The webbing is the top of your glove. That's where the ball's supposed to go because it naturally takes it in and then you close your glove around it, right? That's where it's supposed to hit. So this guy just didn't close his hand fast enough,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's the reality here. He just didn't get it done.
Or he did, and then when he got brought to the ground, it's popped up.
This guy should be thanking his lucky stars that there is some suggestion that it got near him because he just made bank on a ball that shouldn't have been his, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, well, in situations where it's a foul ball that goes into the stands and someone grabs it, the first one who grabs it, there also aren't too many anyways, violent mobs that gather around the ball and people.
No, but that was
battle each other.
probably a little assumption of the risk, right? Couldn't you say that that's going to be a pretty significant fight over the ball? People know going into this, they're assuming at this point, we're talking $1 million ball is gonna get hit into the stands. $1 million ball, right?
But does that make it okay for people to commit criminal acts against each other?
No, but there's no suggestion that this one guy committed a criminal act against the other.
Right.
Let me just ask you, you've seen those, well, I think it still happens, but let me just go late 80s, early 90s, Toys R Us opening the day after Thanksgiving, and like those crazed parents are trying to remember, let's say late 90s, early 2000s, Tickle Me Elmo, right? Who cares, right? But this is like the toy, right? Whatever those egg things were that hatch an animal.
Oh, yeah.
Hatchimals. Okay, I was like saying it. I was like, it was something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody cares about it now, but that day, these people will mob each other, beat each other with some toy off the shelf for a toy. So you don't think that it would be reasonable for people to know, you better be real careful because $1 million ball is going to be falling in the sand sometime today.
No, I'm not saying that he didn't know. You're saying that Hayashi didn't do it. I'm saying it didn't matter because it was out of Pop-Pot's control because other people attacked him.
Precisely. It was out of his control. Yeah. So you just saw how that cross-examination went. So officer, you're saying it was outside of his control, right? Right. Okay, no further questions, right? Okay. So I mean the reality is I get what you're saying. And I totally like feel for the other guy who's trying to catch the ball. But the reality of the circumstance is, you know, trying is not doing. So we get to a point where now they have to try and apportion this, yes?
feel like the Mexican side's coming out that now. It's like the piñata. Your hand's hovering over candy, but somebody else grabs it.
I'm Irish and Italian too, so you can understand where all of this comes from, okay? The combination of the three is a little frightening for some people sometimes. Yeah, no, I get it, right? So I mean, this is the reality though. He didn't get it done. The court disagrees. They say, okay, well, he had this pre-possessory interest. He intended to possess the stuff. I just want to be like, well, my client only intended to possess the narcotics. They didn't actually possess the narcotics because, oh my gosh, these aren't my pants, right? That's, by the way, my favorite defense ever. People, they're getting patted down. It's like, oh, what about this meth? These aren't my pants. These aren't my pants. Okay. So, I mean, I get it. And so the court also felt that this guy had some interest in it because it wasn't his fault that it got knocked out, right? Okay. But they were saying, like, but for him being knocked over, he would have caught the ball. Is that true? We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know, right?
Yeah, we don't know.
So that's the part that really ruffles my feathers. We don't know. I mean, there's literally, I mean, it didn't so much happen to me.
From too though, because the only certainty of this case is that Hayashi ends up with the ball. He
Right.
has possession.
Because I mean, let me use your football analogy, right? So you ever joke with anybody like, oh, hey, sorry, I didn't mean to hit you right in the hands with the ball? Right, so they throw the ball right, it's like it hits you in the, boom, like just a lead balloon, right? So you're just, you think it could have hit right into his glove, he still may have dropped it. So that, in and of itself, that it hit his webbing doesn't tell me that he caught the ball. Because you can hit someone right in the hands with the ball, and they might still drop it. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's okay. You're on the side of the court. I'm not. So unfortunately, I'm the one that's arguing till I'm blue in the face of the court and being like, but no! May I be heard one last time, Your Honor? Sure, it's not gonna change our thoughts, but sure, why not? Earn your pay. So
you found the one person that was going to disagree with you, very quickly, because you said one person every year always argues.
well, I mean, at least.
At least.
Yeah, I mean,
I was gonna say.
usually it's somebody that doesn't play sports. Like I'm a little surprised that it's somebody who is using similar analogy. Then I just feel like you really weren't that good.
Wow.
Like you dropped the ball a lot. And you're like, but I tried.
I tried.
Like I feel like you got an appreciation ribbon. Like a participation ribbon. But I feel like you were probably way better than that.
I had a gun and I threw a lot of people out at second base that were trying to steal.
I feel you. I feel you. All right. That's why I played water polo. My arm got a lot stronger. All right. So I'm gonna tone it down a little bit here.
One day I'll bring in gloves and we can go outside.
Beautiful.
Toss around.
I love it. I don't know how to throw a baseball though.
Oh, really?
Yep. It's so much lighter than a softball that I throw it right into the ground. Yeah. I should learn at some point.
Indeed. All right, well, that was.
You can make a bigger welt with the softball.
That's true. Having been hit by both, yeah, that's true. In the head.
Oh dear.
That was many years ago. So, and the school I went to, they do it your head. That's the way we played.
Why did you play catcher? Why did you choose catcher?
What do you think?
Most action, that's why I did. I was like, I can't be sitting out in the field waiting for the ball to hit me. I have to be involved in every.
I'm not a type A personality at all. You can see the entire field, and I control the field. I control what you throw. I control where the ball goes. And I like outfield also, because I don't want to get hit with the ball that fast if I'm in infield. Yeah, pretty much. I just like to be able to make you all my puppets.
I just think it's crazy how it's the only sport you can be terribly out of shape and get paid millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Anybody seen the Babe Ruth?
Sit the ball.
That guy's literally mobbing hot dogs and beer on the way up to the
There's a
plate.
Yankees pitcher right now that's like, CC Sabathia, he's like 300 pounds.
He's a big dude.
He's huge. I mean, he's like 6'7", but he's like fat too.
That's a lot of weight coming behind that ball.
Do they have pin runners in professional?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
You
did
can.
pin runner in high school.
Yeah.
They used to say we were running for soccer, and I can't.
I was the fastest on our team home to first. And I hit like 9 triples in preseason one year because I couldn't get my behind around third fast enough. The only home run I hit was a grand slam. And that's because I knocked the girl down at home and she dropped the ball. Well, that was one of the 2 times that you have to teach that lesson to catchers. The other one, the girl didn't have the ball and she stood on home plate. And you learn real fast about that.
If you're running, you just learn to hit them as hard as you can so they drop the ball.
You can't really do that anymore now. They got like a little soft about it, but if you don't have the ball and you're standing on home plate, you should just plan to not play the rest of the game. But I swear I'm a lover, not a fighter.
Well, today's was quite spirited, I have to say. Good job on both ends.
Oh yes.
I mean, you guys almost saw me, but okay.
But
anyways.
never. Then he's like,
Never
nah,
quite,
you're wrong.
because, you know, I don't play sports. Who does not play sports?
That's not.
I mean,
Ever?
I mean, everyone plays some sports. I'm just curious. Anyway, so, all right. Okay, first things first, let me ask you a couple questions.
And I apologize, I do have to excuse myself for
Yeah.
a particular matter, but I will be back after the break.
Alright, so let me ask you a question first. Why is this case different than the case before the Brazel took place? Why is this one different than Eads versus Brazel? If you compare the two, they sound fairly.
Because in the other one of them could have done something to get possession and didn't, and this one, yeah, I would just roll.
Okay, so in other words, in the other, in the Brazelton case, there was really no argument that Brazelton actually physical possession of the lead, right? It's not a question, he left it there, right? That's why this case is different than the Brazelton case, because interestingly, Hayashi is making an Popoff is making the argument that he did in fact possess the ball. Because if he did not actually possess the ball, think about this, he can't bring an act for conversion. It's not haters. So you see that's a very key point. And if he can't make that case, he loses. Right? He has to have some kind of physical possession of the ball. So interestingly enough, this case actually is in a line of cases that go back to the 1800s, or that probably. Maybe the 1800s, probably also late 17 cases, 17 cases. So it's not that weird of a case. However, we are dealing with a baseball, right? In a the 73rd home run. So would it be fair to say that in baseball park with gloves, all that stuff? Would it be fair to say that this case has, as history now tells us, is unique to these facts and is in fact never will be cited and has not been cited to this day by any other court? That's true. This case has never been cited. It's unique to its facts. All right. So again, it's a very odd case. All right. Now, for me, as law professor guy, okay, it's like never had this. Okay. I mean, it's pretty easy in one way. It's like because that's tort law. That's what we're talking about. So that call's kind of easy. Well, again, this case is somewhat unique. Now, why it's interesting though is because you have 3 theories of how you can. How do I say? There's 3 theories of how you acquire property. Right? The first one is title. That means you own it, right? If you buy a house, you own it, right? That means you can buy and sell it. Okay, so that's one way that you can actually classify property. I own it. That's the most rights you can possibly have. And anything I want to do. Possession, though, is also, again, very important because a possessor has certain rights. think landlord-tenant, right? The landlord owns it, but the tenant possesses it. Therefore, as a practical matter, the tenant can do anything they want except one. They can do anything that the owner can do except one thing. They can't sell it, right? So that's a lot of rights if you think about it. That's a lot of rights. So possession is pretty good sometimes, including if you're talking landlord-tenant. Possession even runs to the fact that at certain times the tenant can actually exclude the landlord. Is that true? Absolutely true. And there you go. The third way you can actually acquire rights to property is by use. If you have the right to use something. If you're thinking real property, think about an easement. You don't. Do you? That means that you have the right to go over someone else's land, right? Do you own the easement? It's not on your land. Do you possess the easement? No, it's not on your land. But what do you get to do? You have the right to use it, and then the owner can't stop it. So you see, there's three different ways that you can actually classify property rights. So in our case, though, we have some weird stuff going on because he's bringing this case for conversion. He has to prove possession or it can't stand. And so we have this little problem right here, which is, on top of everything else, is that there's 17 witnesses that testify. I don't know if you guys caught that. Are any of them reliable? Are any of them? Some are more reliable than others. But what did most of them do? If you read that section in there, the court is even taking like a jab at it.
Didn't someone like change the story?
They change their stories and what else? Come on, give me the word on the top. Why is it this phosphorus plant? They never like to use the word that it is what it is. What did they do? Yeah, this is class. They lied. Thank you. Come on, you people. This is going to be one of the great days in your life when you get up in court and say, "Lawyer!" It'll be a great day. So, now let's lie on. So, there we go. We have that situation. 17 witnesses, the court goes, I don't know. They go to 3 different experts, right? They give these theories, right? What does the court say? I don't know. All these guys are contradicting each other, right? And so what happens is they look at it and they say, well, here's the deal. Here's what's going on. And again, if you follow up, this case has kind of been explained a couple times, by legal authorities. This is pretty much what we're come up with. As a practical matter. They come up with this unique theory because they don't want, and just, well, let me just back it up real quick. I'll just make a point too. Sort of make the argument you had there a little bit more around it is, and really at the break, go and watch the video. I mean, it's just hand moaning. That's all it is. It's just a bunch of things going like this, and you have no idea what it is. Okay, and so the bottom line is nobody really knows what happened. Okay, because they've got too many people saying too many different things. So that's a problem as well. But the thing is the ball comes down. If we have to guess, we're pretty sure that it did hit. He got into the web of his glove, which is where you're supposed to catch it, and then he's violently tackled on purpose. Okay, that's pretty much been figured out. Okay, that's a little important fact there. He's tackled on purpose because they're trying to knock the ball loose. Okay, because believe it or not, there's a group of people out there who what? To split the ball. If any one of us gets it, they'll split it. So just tackle them and maybe I'll pick up the ball. Okay, but it's a fact you don't see on the surface of this case, which made the court very unhappy when they found that out later. And that's why they lied, because they didn't want to disclose this conspiracy that was going on. Anyways, with that said, though, they go ahead and we think it was in the netting, but he gets tackled on purpose. I mean, they're not going after the ball, they're going after him, all right? And so the ball comes out, it rolls on the ground, and to Hayashi, who's also, you see what happened was they just started tackling people. It's a bizarre story. But anyways, with that said, and Hayashi literally is on the ground, right? He literally is, he's hit the ground, he's going, ow, and he opens his eyes and the ball's sitting there, like right in front of him. He's like, what? And so he grabs the ball, right? He's, oh, it's the ball. And he puts it in his pocket, partly because he wants the ball, partly because of what? Doesn't want to get hit again. So he just puts it in his pocket and he starts to walk backwards. If you actually believe the story and everything, it seems pretty believable. And then finally, he just sort of backs off. And then finally, what he does is pretty smart guy. He turns to the guy with the video camera and says, the guy's like, what? He doesn't. And so he videos himself holding the ball. Now that's known as what? Good evidence. I've got the ball. It's right here. Can anybody else do that? There's no other evidence like that in this case. Anyways, but the court goes ahead and they do. Again, this case is unique to itself. It's never been cited by another case as being, precedent for their decision. And it probably never will be, to be honest with you, because it's pretty weird. But what they do is they make up as a legal fiction this idea of prepossession. Now you may notice that because they have a huge conversation in the middle of this case about intent, right? Why? Because he intended to catch the ball. And had he not been tackled purposefully, right, for the purpose of, making sure nobody else with this little cadre got the ball, they make up this legal fiction called prepossession. It doesn't exist before this case, and it's never existed in another case after, so you see it's quite a weird case. But they make that up, and the reason being is because they've decided that they want to split the money. Okay, they said it's not fair that it's not fair what happened. I mean, he's literally saying this is not fair, right? And so they come up with this theory of prepossession. Interestingly enough, is prepossession enough of possession to keep a count for conversion? And the answer is yes, because at least they get half. And so, like Solomon, this judge splits the ball in half. Now, interestingly, because it's also a very interesting discussion that you two had, because you actually were talking about something that legal scholars still look at this case, and they say, no. And here's one of the things, though, that is real interesting. And again, it doesn't solve the case. Or it doesn't. It's just another theory to think of. But one of the reasons why the court is so sympathetic to Popov, they were actually very clear about this if you read the entire case, is because his situation is a little bit different than the analogy to the baseball player or anybody or the football player. Why?
Because he's getting criminally attacked. He's not getting contacted like in football. Right. He's getting punched. He's getting kicked. He's getting, all
so
those.
This is a big, very good. This is a big word in torts you might remember from my first year. He didn't, by buying the ticket to be in that area, what did he not do? That every baseball player or every football player
Didn't consent to.
he does not consent to being criminally attacked or even tortiously attacked, to be honest with you. He never consented to that, nor should he have expected to be so. Now, it just so happens that there's another case that they don't talk about, but just so you know, there was another case that was very close to this, which is, any of you remember Lynn Swank from the Pittsburgh Steelers? They were just this insane. It is arguable that the Steelers, I think 1980 team, was the best football team of all time. And they had a, at least if you ask my dad, it was. That's for sure. But anyways, they had a wide receiver named Lynn Swan, who actually went to school here, by the way. He went to UCLA. And anyways, so what happened is he was playing, and really he's a Hall of Famer now, really good player. And so what happened they're playing against the Raiders, okay, the real Raiders, the Oakland Raiders. And the Oakland Raiders are just the meanest, right? I don't know if you guys remember those years, but they were just, mean, nasty, vicious players. The bad boys of the league, everything, blah, 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 blah. And so who do you think one of their big rivals was back then? Was the Steelers. The Steelers kept beating them, but many years, but that was a big rivalry. Well, what had happened is there was a what do you call it when they defend defending the shoot, I should know that. No, the guy, if you're the wide receiver, who defends you? The cornerback defends you. There was a very good cornerback. I mean, he was pretty good too, named Art Tatum. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he's pretty famous too. Well, what happened is Lynn Swan gets them, and their quarterback was Terry Bradshaw, like that then. And so Bradshaw throws the ball to Lynn Swan. Now, if you were a Steeler fan like I was and my dad was, Terry Bradshaw continually overthrew people every game, and you wanted to kill him anyways. So again, he overthrows Lynn Swan, and the referee whistles the play dead, okay? And it just so happens that, and here's, Lynn Swan's like, well, and there's Art Tatum, right? And he goes, bang, and he gives him a concussion from behind. Here's some text for you. That ain't right, right? And so Lynn Swan sues Art Tatum. Who won?
Swan.
Why? Why did Lynn Swan win?
Because he didn't consent to being knocked out from behind.
He didn't consent to a criminal act after the whistle had blown. And that's basically what that was. It was not considered a legitimate part of the game, and he had no reason to expect it would be. Now that I've told you all this, well, what do you think about the case? A little different than you might look at it first. So again, I make no definitive statement on this case. You might notice that, and will not do so. Not today, not ever, apparently. But because because really, and again, Professor AJ makes a very compelling case every year. It's not bad. I mean, it's just sports, and but somehow with me, he doesn't really consent to criminal assault. To me, it's not. I don't know. I would consider that as well. Do you really want to? See, the problem I have is, do you really want to benefit these guys? But these guys didn't benefit. See, that's where I'm kind of like, oh, I know you want to stop it. I'm all for public policy and stuff like that. But it's a very unique case with a very unique situation, and I can see it. It could have gone either way. But again, they make up this legal fiction. You'll never see another case like this. There has never been one that has used this theory of prepossession. And it never will be. Although never say never. Anyways, as I've said before, baseball, very fine sport. But it's not football. So there you go. That's what I said. All right, so you got that case now? You'll never forget that case now? Anyways, it's a really cool case. All right. So what time is 7:30? Y'all want to take a break? Okay, we'll come back in 15, 20. When I say 15, that means 20. That's August, but more than 20, I start to burn. And if I come back in 25 or that.
You're exactly right.
Good job so far. Good job so far. This class is really aces, I'm telling you.
Because
You guys are
Because they have multiple angles.
Yeah, so it's better able to see.
The first case, I was like, oh, gosh, okay, all of it. I just wanted to see what she said and see if I got it.
Say 980, 993.
That's me?
That's you? Okay, thanks. I honestly didn't think
For sure.
I honestly didn't know, that's what I'm saying.
Well, like, I could see both sides of it, that's why I was like, I just want to find which side she wants to argue, I don't see her either, but. Because I really think that it's like. Oh my god, I think that the court drew the right conclusion that they should split it, but I totally see why. She had the better side for sure. You know, at the end of the day, they don't- she's
You don't have
tired.
your case?
Oh, shoot.
I forget, it didn't print out, I was putting like these cases like, last minute and I can't find it.
You have your computer and you can find it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go find, that's pretty good. It'll come out, it's all good.
I was like, I was so late. And my computer was up. I have to do
Yeah, go ahead, I'll let you. Title.
I don't see, I have mine out.
Do you have the ones from last year?
Yeah, that's about it. If you don't make it a habit, the printing is fine.
Huh?
If you don't make it a habit, the printing stuff.
Yeah, no, my printer, I just got to measure them out.
Who the hell is my flash? Shoot, I don't get it.
Well, that's a good case for you, ball player.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Whoa.
Yeah.
It was fun. Fun case.
Oh, I'm okay. I'm tired. Driving back and forth.
I'm gonna, I do better in
I know.
here, but, I will, there'll be some days that
Yes. But it's not the same, but.
What is the, do you have the CDTA code
For the Wi-Fi.
and then the dollar sign?
Just 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I think it's CDTA 1, 2, 3, and then
Oh,
I think.
Still trying.
CDTA underscore 1, 2, 3, and the dollar sign.
I'm gonna use my personal hotspot. And then it connects automatically, right, when you're.
Yeah.
Okay.
reviewing?
No, interview.
Oh,
Ooh, someone interview.
I haven't even started.
I know, me neither. Like it's like I'm like just like kind of like almost done. Then like, what happened? What happened? Like things kept coming up. What's happening here? Let's get the like insurance. Boss like, oh, can we work another time? I'm like, okay. I gotta go to the shop.
My time's over. Yeah, that was good.
But I was only one. I didn't really put you in any of them.
Tell you what, let me go try this.
CDTA 2016 fine.
Oh, that was it. You know what, that's right.
And then it'll just come to a math instance.
I gave the CDs to Cy, so he's gonna do that and give them back to the CDs back to me on Saturday, but he'll have the MP3s on Saturday. Yeah, give them to you guys.
You able to do it? Do I need to bring anything for that?
I don't think so. I'll bring a thumb drive just in case. I'll have it.
I'll bring that money.
Of course. You're good.
It's on my list every day. It's on day.
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Where would we go? Okay, we get to some of the parts that I like, of course. We get to go back to ye olde England now. We don't see a whole lot of English law still cited in America, but believe it or not, you still from time to time will see Armory versus Delamere cited. It's ye olde venerable case, and it does make it into American jurisprudence from time to time still. Very important case. It's a very simple case, very simple lesson, but it tells us what really is the basis of what we call modern finder's law and things of that nature. So this is kind of where it all started. This is this big case, and in England it was huge and things of that nature. So anyways, we go back to King's Bench. It's the honorable year of 1722. Who wishes to stand and deliver?
I'll try. It's not as
No.
exciting as the last case.
But you don't think Jiminy sweeps are Barry Bonds?
Barry Bonds. I have some fun facts. So Barry Bonds' mom filed a workers' comp, and she was in our, actually, I was the adjuster.
Oh.
Till she passed just recently, a couple of years ago. So he would call every so often for his mother, for his medical treatment, so. I know.
Interesting. Very cool.
Okay, so, this was at the King's Bench, 1722. So I have here, as the plaintiff is a chimney being a chimney sweeper's boy. And he found a jewel and took it to the defendant's shop, which was a goldsmith, asking to know what it was. And the defendant's apprentice discovered that it was worth 3 halfpence. So I have that the master offered the boy the money, and the boy refused and insisted to have the thing back, and the apprentice delivered the socket but without the stones. So I believe, if I got this right, he was suing for the trover because he wanted the value of it and not the replevin.
Yeah, they don't know where the jewels are anymore, so
Oh, okay.
that's part of it, the jewels are disappearing.
So I have as the issue as, does the plaintiff's property right have the property right over a found item that's entitled him to full value of the item? So the rule I can figure out was that the finder of a jewel acquire an absolute property or ownership and consequently maintain trover. Not sure that's right.
Pretty close.
Okay. And the holding, so it is, I'm assuming, so it says it was reversed for the plaintiff.
Yeah, plaintiff wins, yeah. Again, plaintiff loses in the lower courts, but wins in the upper court, interestingly enough.
Yeah, I figured that, but it did say that there, so I was going.
But this is the one though where this law comes from, that's why we know.
Oh,
It didn't exist before this case, so this is the first time the court had ever ruled that. Oh, very good, okay, that's a good reading. Again, it's a really short case, but you have to know it. It's really, really important. It's one of the very few that's still that actually has an English, it's from an English jurisdiction, but they still cite it here. Going way back when, because there's no actual case like this here. We do it. That's why we cited, so we just use this one. Kind of cool. Okay, so it's not a terribly complex story. We're going back to England in 1700s, and you've all seen Mary Poppins, and we know how chimney sweeps are very lucky. And apparently, this chimney sweep is very lucky because most chimney sweeps, by the way, were very young. This fellow was probably between 13 and 16 years old because you had to go up into the chimney at a certain point and sort of swab it out and stuff like that. So you had to be really tiny to do this. These things are not really big, okay, for the most part. It's kind of funny because there's actually also, I was a job, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but you have to ask yourself, and it's really cool, but in Japan, they actually still have chimney sweeps for smokestack companies. And what happens is they actually drop a guy into a smokestack with brushes all around him, and he actually sort of goes down the thing. This is actually still a job in Japan, if you can believe that. And so you see these guys climbing up, because all the smokestacks have little rungs on them, and they climb up and they've got all this stuff on them. It's really amazing. And then they jump in, and you're like, oh my God. And sure enough, they come out of the bottom. Sure enough, of all things. Can you believe that? Anyway, so chimney sweeps being what they are. But anyway, so this fellow is a very lucky chimney sweep. And he goes in, he's actually, I believe if I read the story correctly, he's sort of below, and he sort of goes in and he reaches up and he bumps against something. And what it was a piece of jewelry. And he looks at it and it's got all these stones in it, and it actually is made of gold. And so he's like, ooh, And so he takes it, and of course, like every good chimney sweep, did he put it in his pocket? Took off. And so he goes ahead and he goes to an appraiser, right? And the appraiser's apprentice is there, and he says, well, let me see what you got. And so he hands it to him, and the apprentice goes, I'll be right back. And so then he goes in the back room, and he offers him, 3 pence or something? 3 halfpence?
Yeah.
Okay, this is chump change for that. This is like, forget this, he says, I'll just take it back, and he says, well, suit yourself. And he gives him back, what's called, what do we call it today, the casting, I think, but anyways. But he gives him back the jewelry without the gems, all the really valuable gems are gone. And so naturally he says, hey mate, where's me gems? And the guy's like, what gems? What gems? They were never in there. You know, and even if they were, you're not the owner anyway. So you're not the boss of me. Or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, so chimney sweeps being what they were, he goes to court. He says, hey, all right. And so the question becomes, and again, I don't know the actual answer, but it's somebody's house, so we think, you know, somebody probably owns it, right? But the owner never comes forward. You know, they make an effort to find whoever, and they think it's probably somebody who was, you know, put it up there, they hid it, and that person probably died. And so we don't really know who did it. We know that neither the chimney sweep nor the apprentice are actually the true owners, right? You know, someone else put it there. So who has the better right as between the two of them? And this is, nobody knew. It sounds weird, but again, that's how law works to some degree. You know? And they had to make that decision is who actually has, you know, neither of them actually really have title, right? But one of them must have better title than, or better title would be a good way to say it, than the other. And they say, well, in a situation like this, where we don't really know who the true owner is, although we know that neither of these are the true owners, the person who comes into possession first, that's how we're gonna do it. And so they just say it. You say, well, that's how we're gonna do it. First in time, first in line, right? So this is one of the times where what does work? Finders, keepers, visitors, leavers. It is one of those where the first in time will take title over anybody else except who? The true owner. And in this case, the true owner is not stepped forward, so chimney sweep wins. And that's the bedrock basis of our laws in the United States now. That's where all of our laws of findings basically, for the most part, come from. And that's the order that we see it in. So it doesn't matter how many it goes through, it's like, that's the order. Yeah. Until you come to a what? A fighting purchaser. That breaks the chain. And we'll get to that in the class later. But that's this huge case. So short case, to say the least, but super important if you're gonna do proper law. And besides, it gives you a chance to go into court and say, case of Omri versus this great stuff. You know? Do that to them. Okay, we good? All right. So, but remember that one. Okay, so that's actually, you'll hear about that case somewhere someday. It's just a huge, huge case. All right. Moving forward, we have some other, English law that's, again, this is where all these laws come from. Bridges versus Hawksworth, again, an interesting case.
Okay. So the plaintiff here is Bridges, and he was a frequent, business dealer with the defendant, the owner of the shop. And upon his leave, he found a parcel that was left on the floor. He notified the defendant, Hawksworth, of it, and he says, "Hey, hold on to it until the true owner comes and claims it." 3 years passed by. No one claims it, so it was just established to be lost. So Bridges says he came back getting the notes, and which Hawksworth refuses. So Bridges filed suit to claim ownership, and a lower court ruled in favor of Hawksworth, the defendant, and this is where Bridges appeals.
Okay.
And so the issue we're looking at here is when there's a lost item found on property, it's open to the public, does the finder of the lost item or the owner of the real property retain possessory right? And so the court cited, of course, the previous case, Armory v. Delamare, and saying that a lost property, is provided possessory right to the finder, unless except for the true owner. Here, the way they reasoned there's a decision, which is, for bridges, is that, it was the only way that the Hawksford came into possession of it was when Bridges, the plaintiff, brought it to his attention, and saying something about like since it's an open venue, or it's a public place, anyone else could have like claimed possession of it other than Bridges.
Okay.
So I guess they conclude that they wanted to take out a general rule that the finder of a lost article is entitled to it as against all parties except the real owner. So it's going back to the previous case again.
Okay, so we're building our chain here, right? This is sort of your building blocks of all this different law. So let me ask you a question. All right, so far, right, chart here, which real simplistic, might be useful. I don't know. So what we do when we talk about the law of finding is we really do two things, right? The first thing we do is classify the property. Is that correct? During these cases. And just out of curiosity. So after doing your reading, how many classifications of property do we actually have? 3. What's number 1? Abandoned. Very good. What's number 2? In this case. Lost. And what's number 3? Mislaid. Very good. And I'll give you a demonstration of all 3. So you'll know why the difference is, and you'll actually be able to see it. Okay, so we have these 3. And then of course we're gonna go ahead and we're still working on this, but we're gonna classify the finder as well, right? True owner is number 1 probably, then really possessor, if you think about it, and then you sort of mix and match, right? And then everybody in the line, right? Okay. So we've done abandoned already, we've seen that several times. There's our lost case. Okay, so this is our lost case. Now, we're going to see mislaid in a minute, okay? But the next case is about who. This one is kind of too, by the way, the one we just went over. But remember, there's always going to be a wild card over here as far as owners go, true owners, whatever you want to call them. And we're going to have our landowner. Sometimes the person has rights to an object merely because it's on their land. And where do we see that case?
The next one? Is it the next one?
Well, where else did we see it? It's yours just because you have the land. Right, it's the meteor case. Right, very good. Okay. Very good. We've already seen that one. Okay. All right. I guess I'll put true owner up here somewhere. We'll keep filling the box as we go on over these cases. That'll be true owner. At the top of the row. All right. Let's keep doing this. All right. See how many of these we can put up here. Because this is how we do it, even to this day. You can see our laws will collect this theory. Or we could just do finders, keepers, keepers. That'd be easier. You have to ask yourself, why do we make it this complex? Who lost his wallet? Mine now. We used to have a joke when I was in high school. You probably heard it by now. I hadn't even been in grade school, even though it's like you'd walk up to somebody and you'd say, did you lose a wallet with a rubber band around it? And they say, well, yes, I did. And you say, well, I found the rubber band. Yeah, they used to do that when we were kids. You'd be surprised how many adults would actually say that. It's quite fascinating, actually. Okay, so moving forward. Where are we now? Oh, yeah. South Staffordshire Water Company versus Charmin. Who has that case? Okay. And this will be our land case, you think? Landowner has some rights here?
Landowner.
Right. Landowner has some rights here?
So the landowner is the Staffordshire Water Company. Staffordshire Water Company. And they employed someone to clean out one of the pools, water pools. And the defendant, Charmin, he found 2 golden rings in the mud in one of the pools. This takes place also in 1896. And he turned them over to the police hoping to find the true owner, but they never did find the true owner. And then so he wanted to keep the rings, but Staffordshire said, we want them. And the issue was, as the finder of the lost property or the owner of the land had the right to possess the property. So the county court judge ruled in favor of the finder of the rings, which is the defendant, saying the defendant had good title against all the world except the true owner. Plaintiff appealed and won in the court of the Queen's Bench, with Lord Russell citing the difference between this case and the Bridges versus Hawksworth case is that possession of land carries with it in general possession of everything which is attached to or under the land, and in the absence of the true owner, the right to possess it. He went on to say that it makes no difference if the possessor is not aware of these. So the rule is the owner of the land upon which the lost property is found requires a superior possessory interest to that of the finder. If the owner exercises actual control of the land and is on it.
Okay. Good reading of the case. Out of curiosity though, what is debt due?
That was the type of lawsuit here.
Get another copy now. Why is, and again, if you're forgetting these things, don't worry, I'll remind you of them. Good at that. Why is debt due different than Pleasant or Trover? Even if you don't know them today, but you hopefully never forget them again. If you come up all through your classes, you'll see.
It's a legal claim regarding wrongfully obtained goods or possessions.
But why is that different than?
Oh, why is it different?
Yeah, why is it different than? What do you have to have as a slight difference between that and conversion, quite frankly? Anyone know? I mean, this one's pretty. You're getting down there to the common kind of stuff. This one, the true owner is not actually known, and it has to be among possessors. So when one possessor thinks they have a better case than the other possessor, they bring it to debt because the true owner is not known. So that's what makes debt legal. Right. So there you go. Again, this is like a public waterworks back in the old days. They put water in these big ponds. The owner of the waterworks calls these guys every so often to clean out the ponds for them. And the defendant sends in two of his workers. They go to the bottom. One of them, they're cleaning out. They find two rings. For some insane reason, they give it to the boss. The boss says, "Good, these are mine now because I found them." Waterworks says, "Not so fast, right? Because you are our employees. We invited you onto our property. Whatever you find is ours. We didn't tell you you could have that, et cetera, et cetera." Well, if you're an entrepreneurial fellow, you know, and you have these two rings, you're probably going to talk about Omri versus Theory, right? Don't know who the true owner is, not stepping forward. But in this case, the court throws into the mix that landowners have certain rights, which again, in this case, gets followed later by the non-legal rights piece. That's cool. So that's where that law comes. Okay, so everyone kind of get that? And you gotta always classify the players. You know, at minimum, when you get a case like this, you gotta know true owners, and I call them P1s and P2s. Possessor 1s, possessors 2. Alright, so they can go ahead and fight on each other and bring the suit for debt, which you don't see very often. That many of situation. 11, watch out. Everyone got that one? Right. And the next case, again, another famous English case. We call this one Hannah versus Peel. Have another weird case, right? I have a big one. No, I didn't volunteer.
Like a big one. Okay. Hannah versus Steele. The defendant is Steele, and he owned the Warren Salon. I'm sure that's his name. He owned the house, which was requisitioned. which means, to demonstrate use or supply of, especially by official order and for military or public use. So the military was using it to house soldiers. So the defendant did not live on the property, and the land was conveyed to him in 38, and it was unoccupied until Hannah, the plaintiff, occupied it. Hannah was the land's corporal. He was stationed in the house. He found a brooch on the top of a window frame, and he turned it over to the police. At this point, the defendant had no knowledge of it until, I'm not sure if the plaintiff told him about it or he knew when it was returned to him. After 2 years, and the true owner was not found. The defendant then sold it for 66 pounds, and then it was later resold for 88 pounds. The fact states that the defendant offered a reward to the plaintiff, but he refused because he wanted the brooch. So I have the issue here as being, does the defendant have a superior claim of right to the brooch found in the house if the brooch was on the surface of the land? And the court goes through two different cases, the Christians in the South Staffordshire, and they didn't use that ruling because they said that he never occupied the land, therefore he could never find the brooch, and therefore the property or the brooch was lost. So they went with the Bridges rule, and what happened the rule is a man possesses everything that is attached to or under his land. However, a man does not necessarily possess a thing which is lying unattached on the surface of his land, even though the thing is not possessed by someone else. So what was different in this case was that the brooch was not like underground or they had to dig it up or anything. It was laying on the surface of the land.
Pretty good. All right. Again, very similar to our later danger right case, except that it's not actually attached to. All right, good job. Short version of this case, again, it's a little bit of an odd case. And fortunately, the next case really explains this theory even better. This case. But again, this is kind of a famous case. Anyone catch the year? 1945. So all of this shenanigans is going on when? During World War II. Kind of weird. Actually, part of it went on during the Battle of Britain, right? I mean, you all know what the Battle of Britain was. The Nazis decide that they're going to bomb England into submission by sending over waves and waves of planes, and the English fight back, for lack of a better term. Strange but true, England wins against ever-surmounting odds, and Winston Churchill becomes probably the greatest politician, leader of the 20th century. That's all. Anyways, but other than that, pretty, But anyways, so what they're doing here, though, is they're requisitioning homes. So what happens is this fellow has bought this home, he's not using it, and he's agreed to let the army use it, or the military, whatever branch they're dealing with. And it's kind of interesting because one of the things so the fellow who finds the Hannah, Hannah finds it, right? Peel's the guy who owns the home. Okay, good. Hannah goes ahead and he's stationed here, so he's a soldier. It's a little weird case. He's not just a guest, he's actually in the house. And so what they're doing is they're putting up these windows, right? These blinds over these windows that called blackout shades or blackout curtains, or whatever you want to call them. The reason why is because the Nazis bombed light. See, so in other words, if you're going to have a light on, you've got to make sure that you've got these curtains, right? So that nobody can see you, otherwise they're going to drop a bomb on you. All right, so while they're putting up these curtains, Hannah reaches up and lo and behold, he finds a brooch, right? Some kind of jewelry, and I guess this little pin, right? And he takes it, right? So fabulous. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers, right? That's where all these cases start, you might notice. And so, Sir Honorable Peel says, ew, not so fast, mate, right? I don't know about this, not sure. And so he brings a case saying, hey, I own that. And what does he cite, of course? Back in the good old day, he's going to cite South Staffordshire Water Company, right? He's gonna say, hey, this is mine. And so what did the court say? Not so fast, mate, because this is a little bit of a different situation. Those rings were dead lost. This person actually, as we see later, mislaid the jewelry. So it's a little bit different. He put it, the owner, who we don't know again, right? Again, missing an owner. We got two possessors again, right? One saying possession by possession, one saying possession by land. However, the property is not lost. It has been put there purposefully and then forgotten. Theoretically, the difference being is if the true owner ever came back, he'd go and look for it. Now, the truth is that the previous owner's probably dead because it wasn't peeled. See, that's the mistake a lot of students make. It was there and Peel never saw it because he never went up into the area that he would put up a curtain. So, see, so he's not the true owner. See, all students go, but it's his house. Yeah, but he didn't put the jewelry there. That's what makes this case a little different. Okay, so theoretically, there is a true owner. Not coming forward, nobody knows where he or she is. Anyway, so you see the difference? So in this case, who has the better right? The finder, the person who actually possesses. So you see how possession becomes really possession even, and that's why that's why it's really great to start with Popoff versus Hayashi. If possessions worth, $200,000, $400,000, whether you possess it or not. And these are very valuable pieces of jewelry. By the way, we're talking about golden rings, like star spangled, Back in those days, everything had lots of gems and jewels in them, very fine work. These are worth a lot of money. So these are, don't think these were small items. These are, for a soldier, that brooch was probably worth his entire year's pay, most likely. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all, not even more. There you go. That's what happens when you have the upper and the lower class, so to speak. All right. Okay. Thank God this American, damn it. Anyways, McAvoy versus Medina. Okay, I think this is our last stop on the English gravy train, right? Yeah. Oh, next we gotta go to Tejas. All right. Madame, please.
Okay, so this is a Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts, 1866. So, it's a tort to recover some money found by the plaintiff in the shop of the defendant. So the defendant was a barber and the plaintiff was a customer in the barber shop. And the defendant, the plaintiff picked up a pocketbook that was laying on a table and said, look what I found. So the defendant counted, he asked him where he got it, and then he went over and counted the money that was in the wallet. The plaintiff told him to keep it, and if the owner should come to give it to him, and also to advertise it, which the defendant promised to do so. Let's see. Apparently, nobody came forward, and the plaintiff made 3 demands for the money, and then the defendant, the defendant refused to return the wallet to the plaintiff. So plaintiff sued for the amount of money in the wallet. And
Well, you don't really want the wallet, right?
no. And I have here that the trial court had ruled for the defendant because plaintiff had no cause of action. So plaintiff appealed it, alleging exceptions. Now, they talk about the Bridges versus Oxworth case, but they stated here that it was found that the true owner did not place this voluntarily, the item voluntarily. But they also say that the present case resembles that of Lawrence v. versus Estate. I didn't see what that was So I have here as the issue is if property is left by mistake voluntarily, can the finder claim it as their own? And in this other case, the Lawrence v. State, it says here that it was held that to place a pocketbook upon a table and to forget to take it away is not to lose it, in the sense in which the authorities refer to speak of lost property. So they said that the defendant's act in receiving and holding the property in manner he does not create any, so the exceptions were overruled for the right to property.
Okay. Good. That's a good reading. Again, these aren't terribly long cases, but we have to get them right. Otherwise, you can't really, you'll never be able to build those units and figure this stuff out. So the difference in this case is that we have what's called mislaid property. Is that correct? Okay, it's not lost because when someone loses something, right, that's more like negligence, right? That's more kind of like you shouldn't have done that. You know, it's like losing something. You didn't mean to do it, but you did. So that's kind of like negligence. When you mislay something, is that the same level of negligence? Or when you put something down, do you expect maybe you might get it back? You just mislaid it. I mean, think of like, how many of you have ever left your keys at a supermarket? How many of you have left your keys at a supermarket about 400 times? Okay, I get out to my car and I'm like, I've done this at least 100 times. No wonder I'm a professor. I'm perfect for it anyways, but do I expect to get my keys back because I was digging for my credit card and everything, and I just put like, keys right there on this little table? I probably expect to get it back because worst case scenario, what do I expect them to do?
Steal your
I hope not. Well, they will. I found a car with a rubber band. Never steal my food. Check that. I wouldn't. I just love it when I've tried this a couple of times. Again, don't do what I do. It's not wise. But a couple of times, valets have brought the wrong cars. And someone says, "That's not your car." I tried it twice now. That's not with the Kaiser Grill. They almost called the police, so it's pretty fun. Anyway, don't do like I do. Anyways, I offered to trade. Okay. Anyways, with that said, that's true, by the way. Not making that up. Anyways, I once took out a credit card in my dog's name. That's true. Don't do that either. Do not do these things. They don't end well. Yeah, question?
Yeah, I want to ask a question about what is the difference between the banknotes discovery, in that case, and the pocketbook? Because I don't really see a huge difference. The banknotes, they were deemed lost, right?
Well, that's a great question. Let me, that is a great question. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump ahead of my presentation. Hold on one second. And I will show you the difference. And you will see, and you will agree with this.
Or else.
Yeah. Well, you will.
Yeah, he didn't mean to leave the notes there.
Okay.
It's from the but I'm going to do a good that. You see that? Yeah. Good. All right. Let's say, okay, here's my wallet. Again, you don't want it. There's credit cards in it, but they're maxed out. Forget it. And I can tell you, I can tell you that there's no possibility on this planet there's more than $2 in there. Not going to happen. I never have cash. Never asked for cash. Doesn't exist as far as I know. Anyways, here's a wallet. Okay. I throw it out into the trash, right? And you fish it out, right? Okay, what kind of property is that? You have three choices. What does the situation tell you, right? That's why with your trash, that's why the officers can go through your trash, by the way, when you put it in the can on the street, because it's considered you've abandoned it. So that's abandoned property, got it?
Okay. What if it's like in your trash in your house?
Well, I don't know what the police can do about that, but again, it seems to be indicative of somebody that no longer claims the property, wouldn't you say? But that's a good question, because it all depends on the circumstances.
Are you barricading yourself in case you catch Barry Bond's ball? See, the fatal flaw was that guy should have been hitting the roids before he went to go catch that ball, and he would have been better equipped to protect himself.
There's been no question.
Right. Yeah, he probably would have just crushed the ball, right? Yeah, step right back into this.
So, we're good on that, right? I mean, you all agree that I would think that would be abandoned property, you threw it out.
Oh, we're talking lost or mislaid?
Yeah.
Can I give my Costco example first?
Sure.
Or after? Okay,
Yeah. I can
so
do
you
the
probably
same.
just did that. Gave the lost or mislaid.
Yeah, a little bit of it, but you're actually, I just read cases.
Okay, so let me give you the example that I feel like is totally like everybody's done it, right? Whether it's sunglasses, wallet, something, you're at the store, right? I love Costco, because who doesn't love Costco, right? So you walk up to the counter, I'm getting my Costco card out, I'm getting all the stuff, you know, I'm on the phone with somebody obviously because you're trying to multitask. So you set it up on that counter, you put the wallet down, you go to swipe the card, right? My purse is on the card. I intended for it to be set there, right? But then I grab the card, you don't want to put the receipt away, and they hand you the Costco card back with it, so you're like, okay, you throw the stuff in your purse, or you put the thing in your pocket. Anybody ever lost the, by the way, lost the receipt from the Costco checkout person between the time that you check out and the time you get to the door? And then you're like, it's like the reverse of getting into a club, right? You're like, they won't let me out. They won't let me out, okay? So you get to the door, you get out, you get to your car, you're on the way home, you go, oh my God, I don't know where my wallet is, right? Because at that point, you're like, oh geez, I better put the Costco card away, right? Is that lost or mislaid?
Mislaid.
Why?
Because you intended to leave it, but you didn't intend to abandon it.
Right. Now, different scenario, same circumstance, or different, slightly different hypothetical here. I paid for it, I'm walking out, I set it next to my purse, or I try to set it in my purse, but it's kind of still sticking out. I go unload all the stuff, and while I'm picking up one of the boxes of stuff that I've purchased, because it's giant, I knock the wallet, and it lands on the ground next to my cart. I put the stuff in the back of the car, get inside, throw my purse in, close everything up, put your cart back, right? I'm like, super pet peeve, okay. Put your cart back, you drive away, you go, oh my God, I don't know where my wallet is. So you gotta go back to the Costco parking lot, you park, you go, okay, when's the last time I had it? I had it when I checked out because I know they let me leave the store, right? So I paid for everything. So now you're searching around, lost or mislaid? Lost. You didn't intend for it to be knocked out of the purse. You didn't intend to leave it in the middle of the street, right? So that's how my brain works for lost or mislaid. Very kind of weird example, but we've all done it, right? Or you set the sunglasses down, right? Or you go to dinner and you take your sunglasses off and you set them down. You want to see where my sunglasses sit all the time? On the end of my purse, because I do it all the time. I'm that person that's like, I can't find my sunglasses. Oh, there they are, right? And there's like 3 pair. Yeah. So embarrassing. I've literally had sunglasses on my head before and then forgotten that they're there and put another pair on my head. And I'm like, yeah, just in case. So that's how I identify lost versus mislaid. And you just want to be able to articulate whether or not there was an intention for the item to have been set there. You know, if there was any care taken in doing so, right? Because if you just dropped it on the floor, then you're probably not as concerned, right? Okay. There you go.
Okay, so, demonstration of what she just said. You find this in here. Abandoned, right? It's the circumstances themselves tell you it's abandoned, okay? Here I am, and you can pretend it's any store or any establishment you want, really. You find something, forget this here, but you find this here. What would you classify it as?
Mislaid.
Probably mislaid, and probably again have a higher level of negligence, do you agree with me? Than to have something that, let's say, you came one day and you saw this left turn out here was turned this way and this is here, which will probably happen someday. I'm just waiting for it. Anyways, what do you think? It's probably mislaid.
You check to see if there's any cash she left behind.
Yeah, which is always how much?
$2 less.
$2. I said there's 2 credit cards and $2. The credit cards are maxed out half the time. And that's about it for me. But you see how it has to do with intent and circumstance. Okay, and the lesser negligent you are, the more rights you have to expect it to be returned as against the person who's the possessor, because you are the what? True.
So this is a very factually driven analysis.
Yeah, very good. I like it. I'll go with the trash. But it is good, right?
It is.
Clearly, you can see it in front of you.
Oh gosh, you actually brought it in from outside. All right.
Yeah, fine, that one.
Which case are we on now?
Slave versus
Yeah, Schley.
just said maybe not.
And now, just when you thought it was safe from the Romans, you're wrong. So where are we gonna go to find out? And we're going down to Tejas, right?
What page?
133.
All good stuff.
Okay, but here's all those perfect English cases.
Darn.
Okay, so who's got Shenley versus Couch?
I know.
Who can tell me about Texas in 1955?
So plaintiff here is Schley, purchased a home, he had a half finished garage, so he hired some contractors, and so they were working on the garage. He couldn't get the tractor inside the garage, so there was the defendant was also working under that contractor. He was tasked with using, I think it's a pickaxe to break apart the soil. And upon that, he came across a jar full of money. Some of that had some wine bills from the World War II. And the full amount was about $1,000. So a glass jar popped and some glass was found nearby. So it's indicative that money had been buried in that glass jar. So the plaintiff sued the petitioner for money and certain damages in the trial court. The two issues were, was it mislaid or was it lost?
That's a little confusing to me when you say the plaintiff sued the petitioner.
The plaintiff himself, plaintiff sued the defendant in the trial court, and they determined that it was mislaid property. However, when it came to appeal, the court of appeal said it was a treasure. So it was big as a treasure trove. So the finder is the one that opened the price over what lost that property was found. So question we have here. So I guess first issue then is it mislaid or is it what they call the treasure trove doctrine? And so the court quickly disposed of that doctrine, saying that we're not going to recognize that.
Why?
Why? it's like finders keepers type of mentality, isn't it?
Well, dirt is ancient, so I don't know. Sometimes our cases are pretty old, but okay, let's go with what did they decide to use?
Well, they look more towards this one case called Jackson Steinberg, and well, actually, I'm gonna go back. They wanted to characterize it more as a miscellaneous property instead of a lost property in this case, because from the facts of the case, it looks like this was carefully placed there, and they probably had intention to come back, but we didn't have that chance. It was buried in a glass jar, so.
How far down was it buried?
How far down?
I don't recall if the case said,
I didn't see a number.
but I mean, deep enough that the jar was completely covered, correct? And they used the same term they used in that other case, right? Embedded. So, but we don't have any facts to suggest this fell out of the sky from some passing by plane and shot into the ground, right? And it probably would have broken if it did. So it probably, if you're, at least taking one step, they didn't give this fact specific, but I think the inference that you can draw there is it was probably carefully placed in that position because of the delicate nature of the container. I mean, it was glass, right? So you wouldn't try and crank it in there. You probably dug out a hole, set it in there. Otherwise, the glass would have broken. So I think you can infer by the fact that the glass was, well, what's that?
Oh,
That it was placed in a certain position, that it was probably done so intentionally and with care, right? So if it was done intentionally and with care, it really starts to cut off the argument of it being lost, right?
I mean, I guess it goes straight to the point that since it's mislight property, it's the finder does not retain possessory, right? It's the owner of the property, which goes back to the case the barber shop is.
But were either the true owner in this case?
No, neither was a true owner. No, actually, they were never able to establish it. They said at the beginning of the true owner never established.
So then you go to the next best? Who then had more of an interest in possession?
The one that owned the property.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So one quick question, and then we good job and move on to this case. But just out of curiosity, did anybody look up where treasure trove comes from? Of course, I would. That could give you a hint. It must be at least centuries old. If I know that. That's
The Romans.
the Romans. Pretty good. Okay. Just so happens that about I think 43 A.D., Claudius and the Romans conquered English. Conquered most of the Nile, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they called it what, by the way? I didn't know what they called it. They called it Britannica. So if you ever wonder where the word Britain comes from, or any of those words, it actually comes from the Roman word that they renamed England. You know where London comes from? The Romans went ahead and called, they took a city and they called it Londonium. Okay, and what it ended up being though was this big major trash dump. London used to be a big trash dump. But the thing was is that the English persons, to them, everything that the Romans threw out was like gold. So all these people rushed toward big trash dump in Londonium.
One man's trash.
Yeah, that's how London got established. Seriously. Anyways, one of the things though is although they were conquered in 43 AD, they do gain back the land in 84 AD. Now it just so happens that when the Roman, they knew, in those days everyone knew when things were going south. Things happened very slowly. And so the Romans realized that they're going to have to leave the British Isles. They're going to have to give up. The English have come back. They've got other people on their side, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to lose, right? So So what they do is they tell all of their people, they say, okay, we're gonna lose now, but we're coming back. Yeah, we'll show these, upstarts in Britain and everything like that. But in the meantime, bury all of your treasures. Find a place, bury everything over there, right? But we'll come back and we'll get it, okay? So, all the persons in Rome, Romans that were there, they buried all of their treasures that they could, because they couldn't take them all, things of that nature, right? So, English come back, guess what? The Romans aren't coming back. So one of the things that the British said though was, tell you what we're gonna do. If you are willing to go digging through your property or whatever else have you, whatever you find is yours. They figured it was better just to have them dig it up than have the the state take it. Because if they said, yeah, go out and dig it up, and then when you get it, give it to us, nobody would do it. Okay, so they came up with this theory of law called treasure trove, that if you find Roman treasure, it's yours. And so interestingly enough, I would say it's probably good law in England because, believe it or not, they keep finding stuff, okay? But how much Roman treasure do you think you're actually gonna find in Texas? So you see why they the court says, yeah, that's cute, but we're gonna not adopt this for Texas, okay? There's no real treasure trove, because otherwise it's slave property and it's gonna go to the owner of the home, right? Okay, but it's been a weird case. You all want to know about treasure trove?
This, for purposes of a movie reference for this one, I always think of the movie Stand By Me. Anybody ever seen it?
Nobody is?
Yes.
Oh, that's a great movie.
The Corey Feldman.
Really, really good.
Hello, Kiefer Sutherland. Oh my gosh, if you haven't seen it, watch it, please. Movie education here. But Vern, who is Jerry O'Connell, but does not look like Jerry O'Connell. If anybody has ever seen Jerry O'Connell, he did not look like that when he was a kid. Way better now. He used to bury jars of pennies under the porch of his house. And then he's trying to find them, but he can't remember where he buried it. So I always think of that in this circumstance. That's why I can actually remember cases sometimes. Just assign a movie.
Okay. If you ever do try treasure trove in a court, let me know. I don't think it's been tried lately. Okay, last but I thought is last Wednesday.
Yes.
All right.
It's technically its own chapter, all in one, about bailments and the one case that they assigned.
I mean, bailments is a kind of offshoot of all of this law that we're in, the law of finding, except that it's what's really the difference between bailments and laws of finding? I mean, we're talking property, what's the big difference?
That you're gonna return it.
Yeah, it's by consent. That's really the only difference, but we have to have kind of law for bailments because, and you'll see this over and over again, possession has a lot of rights under both personal and real property. You're shocked how many rights a possessor has. So like every time you give over someone something over, like we were talking a little bit earlier about, what we talking about earlier, like having your car, right? You go up to the valet and stuff like that. Well, what did you just do when you hand them your keys? I mean, what's to stop them from saying, I found these keys? Ooh, and off you go. What stops you?
Ticket.
Yeah, that's about it. Right. But it's the law of bailments. It's not lost and found. It's not a gift. You all agree with me with that, right? It's more of a informal contract. We call it a bailment. Because technically, when that fellow or that lady gets in your car, they have some rights to possession. So we have to have laws that tell you about that. And certainly we do. That's what bailments are.
My husband had a really cool truck when we first started dating. Not that he does it now, but like we just thought it was really cool at the time. And we went to dinner at a restaurant, and the valet took the keys. And when we got back in the car, he's like, "They drove 13 miles in my car," and I was like, "Yep." So he's like, "I know," because he didn't like valet parking his car because of that. So believe me, I never heard the end of it, but now he's totally okay with it. I just thought, yep, they took full advantage. But you gave them your car. And then you know what you could say to me? Babe, it's a truck. Okay? Okay? That's the way you want to win the argument? It's fine.
Okay. So, what's the key word here? Again, kind of control and expectation. Is that fair? Control intent, maybe? Better word. Okay, different kinds of ailments can be created, it's just basically dependent on the situation.
But there's typically like a scope or limited purpose for what the bailment is supposed to encompass, right?
Right, it's a limited type of project. Okay, and again, you can look up whichever ones are. They're right there, in your handout. With that said, who can give me Allen versus Hyatt Regency Nashville Hotel? I like this case, I think it's really cool.
I like this case too.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a multi-state, that's why I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the defendant owns a high-rise hotel in Nashville on Union Street. So at the rear of the hotel is a parking structure that I believe is connected to it because I think it's indoor. So I would assume that it's connected to it. It says throughout the opinion that it's an indoor structure. So it has a single entrance and a single exit. There's a lot of attendant at the front who gives you tickets and that you pay on the way out. And they have like security personnel who make rounds on the floor, from my understanding. So on February 12th, 1981, Edwin Allen drove his new 1981 car into the parking garage with guests, and they were parking there as members of the public. The parking garage allowed you to park there as members of the public and or as the hotel guests. So he locked it, left for the night, and when he came back, the car was gone. The ticket he had gotten when he went into the structure said that the defendant, the hotel, assumed no liability for the vehicles parked in the garage and that people were parking there at their own risk. Both the lower courts held that there was a bailment created and that the defendant was responsible for the loss. And so the defendant's appealing on the rulings of the lower courts.
Why do I feel, even though they say we assume no responsibility, why do I feel like my car should be safe there?
Because it's indoor, you're paying for their service.
So when you say indoor, this is gonna seem like you're giving me the obvious answer. How do I get in?
Through the one way that you can get in.
Is there an arm? Is there a button that I have to press to get a ticket before the arm goes up?
Yeah.
You guys have all parked in a structure, right?
Right.
So, I mean, and it goes down again after you drive through, right?
Yeah.
You can't go out through the entrance. And then how do you get out?
You have to pay somebody on the way out. Somebody is supposed to be attending it to make sure nobody's just
And if there's not, there's probably a machine there now, because these are,
ready.
but this is 1984, so, or 81, so this is probably an actual manned booth, right?
And yeah, if somebody wasn't there, you wouldn't be able to get out until somebody retook their position or their post, went back to the front. If somebody wasn't there, you wouldn't be able to get out.
So, I mean, it gives the sense of security, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that's what the court says in their opinion, is that this wasn't an open lot or, an open with no regulations, and it wasn't an open field.
Anybody ever go to San Diego? They have all the little parking lots and like you go up to the thing and it's like, there's no arm to get in or arm to get out. It's literally a lot. There's like a kiosk and you type in what yours is, but like anybody could come and just walk up, break the window of your car and drive away. Totally different argument than this, right? Okay.
Yeah, well, especially because all the security personnel and all the rest of it that, not just.
What does the security guard say, by the way?
Oh.
I don't remember.
He says, anybody want to try that out?
He gets the phone call that there were cars being tampered with.
He's like, oh yeah, some lady called around 9:30 and said someone was messing with a car, right? Hello, get out of your booth and go check it out. Yes, sir.
Actually, the guy's like, he said, well, it didn't come out here.
on top of 142.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you in the car?
Yeah,
They
they
didn't
didn't come out.
But there's only one way in and one way out, so it's you know.
It didn't disappear.
You might want to discount that testimony.
Funny though, every once in a while, people will report their car stolen in a really big parking structure and not realize that they just forgot where it was.
Yeah.
Like in major metropolitan cities, people will go park and they'll just be like, I don't know, you're at Disneyland, like I didn't know which character I parked near. It happens.
Yeah.
It like truly happens to people.
Yeah, it does, especially on the East Coast, because the structures are like a lot taller depending on where you're at. Like in New York and stuff, there are so many wings and levels and subsections of the structure that people get lost a lot more frequently. Maybe just close to any big city, LA probably has the same stuff. I'm just not too familiar with it. Anyways, so the issue is there a bailment when a car owner parks in a structure, a protected structure, that's operating in conjunction with this hotel or this business? The rule is yes. The court starts talking about a prior Supreme Court case that was heard in New Jersey, and they were talking from 1981 that said that this closely related negligence more than a bailment, but then they turned to the Tennessee courts, however, and said how over history the Tennessee courts have ruled generally that it's more of a bailment issue. So they say that in this case, the defendant didn't drive into an unattended lot. It was a protected structure. He had to pay to get out. There's only one way in, one way out. And they did bring up the phone call earlier. There was negligence established, but they found that it was more related to a bailment because of that kind of implied contract between the two.
So given all that, why does the dissent disagree?
They say that where the garage operator is knowingly or voluntarily assumed control of the vehicle, there's merely a license to park or a lease of a parking space. The ticket didn't identify the vehicle or the operator specifically.
So what's their best argument? If I'm being smart about it as a thief and I can get into the car, what am I gonna go do so I can get out? Because presumably the person's gonna go take the ticket with them. They may not leave it on the dash of their car.
Yeah, say you lost your ticket.
So or go hit the button,
And
get another ticket, go walk up to a car, get in the car. When you leave, here's my ticket. Came and went. I'll pay the $4 for how long I was here, and you just got a $4 car. I mean, if that's what happened, or they can prove that happened, then, but that's what the dissent says, right? Well, they didn't really make it any affirmative showing that there was negligence on the part of the garage.
Yeah.
How could they though? They don't know. You know what I mean? So I'm a little hard pressed to say that there wasn't any responsibility of the garage, but if you're able to get a ticket and go in and you're operating the car, which would lead me to believe that, like, if there's a screwdriver sticking into the what's it called, the ignition, and the guy's like in all dark clothing and like pulls up the mask and he's like, hey, like, fair enough, but chances are that's not what they had, right? Or if like the back window's smashed and there's a screwdriver in the ignition, that's gonna look a little sketchy. And you might be like, yo, why don't you just wait for a second? Because this is looking a little bit bizarre.
It all depends, like you said, on the facts.
Yeah.
On how he got out, because like, was there duty? Yeah, but did they reach their duty? You don't know unless you know the facts of them leaving the garage.
Well, it almost seems like there's obviously some negligence. Like the car didn't.
Yeah.
There's some. What's the word I'm looking for? It's almost kind of like that, but the reality is the car didn't disappear, the car didn't float away, the guy didn't toss it in a bag and walk it out the door. It's a car. He could only get out by driving it out of the man booth. So for them to say like, well, he didn't come out through here, Where could he have come out from?
Right.
If the guy went and drove over the parking curbs and like caused a scene, you probably would have been like, yo, I saw the guy driving the Chevy Impala out of the place because he just drove over the bush on the way out. Then you probably have an obligation to notify somebody, like, this guy's drunk or somebody just stole his car.
No.
Right? We don't have that here. We just got people coming and going, right? The better answer would have been, I didn't see anybody drive a car like that out of here. I don't recall. That's different than it didn't happen, right? Because they just look ridiculous when they say that. Now it just looks like they're lying, right? They're just doing a CYA.
No, the car was completely unassembled and taken out.
In
part by
pieces,
part, yeah.
right?
You never saw these droids.
Oh my god, okay, other weird movie reference, and you probably haven't seen this. Johnny Dangerously,
Oh, that's a good movie too.
great movie. Michael Keaton, if you haven't seen it, watch it. The end of the movie, they're in a police chase. It's a spoof on like old mobster movies. They have like a car that has almost like wallpaper on it. So now you would call it a wrap, right? But at the time, it like looked like wallpaper. They were just pulling it off so that when they were doing the description of the vehicle, it kept changing. So it was like a black Ford whatever is going down the street. Then it was like a white Ford. Then it was like a Ford with bunnies all over it, like, because all of them were different designs. But that's what I think of. It's like, unless you were disguising the vehicle, and they're like, well, we never saw a black, Honda Civic come out of here, but we did see a white one. It's like, well, they didn't paint the thing before they left, so.
That's like the movie Taxi.
I've seen that. With the blue beamer to the red beamer.
Mhm.
I know.
Oh, the one with Queen Latifah and.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Yes,
I haven't seen
yes.
it.
It's a wicked lame movie. It's pretty lame.
Yeah.
But I've seen it.
I do love me some Fallon though. Okay, fair enough.
Good deal.
So, okay, everybody good on that one?
This is my last 2 cents on this case. If you wanted to distill this case down to the definition of bailments that you should take, just look at the third full paragraph on page 144, and it tells you all about, strangely, possession, control, and expectations. And I think that's really the kind of the key to understanding bailments. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm very pleased with how you guys are doing in this
That's
class.
great.
Like
Yeah,
you're doing
really good
very
class.
well.
Yeah.
Like it's gonna start getting a little sketchy.